call this meeting to order. It's at 7 o'clock. You guys, should we take a roll call?
I think I may, but I
Probably a
can't.
good idea. So we'll start with you and work our way around the corner.
Okay. Donovan Tinkerman, Comprehensive Plan Review Committee.
Chad Redway, Town Planner.
Tom Dillon, Comprehensive Plan.
Susan Roth, Planning Committee or Planning Board.
Marty Kane, Planning Board.
Tom McGinn, Planning Board.
Dorothy Gregor, Comprehensive Planning Committee.
Sean Hayes, Comprehensive Planning Committee.
Rich Canal, Planning Board.
Jens Bergen, Planning Board.
You guys saw the agenda.
I could use a new one, thank you.
Hey, we're outside.
I'll take one.
Well, sure, okay.
You don't wanna wait for that, you just take mine off.
You want to, Tom?
We're out of here.
I got one. Thank you. Okay, you should have three different items related to home occupations.
Excuse me, but do we have minutes?
Yeah, we do have minutes. Thanks, a lot of extras.
That's a good thing, because I didn't,
Yes, you did, because you commented on it.
no, there were no minutes in the attachments that I got.
No.
No, well, I sent them out when I did them back in November.
Like I can remember November.
Okay,
I don't-
well.
I didn't recall it was the entire set of minutes, I thought it was the home occupation section. But I may be correct on
Well,
that.
I tried to keep it brief, but unfortunately, I went to 2 pages. Hands, you need one? Oh, that's just, everybody gets one.
Everybody got me.
Yeah, sure.
You weren't here. You can't.
So, for those of you that were here, Donna, Tom Danwick, Jens Bergen, and Susan Roth, and myself, are there any changes or errors or omissions that you think need to be taken for these minutes?
Is this wrong, Dad? I pointed this out, right?
I don't know, that was that's what I wrote down in my
Says the
notes.
group generally concurred
Wrong.
with my proposal that all home occupations, I thought the group was opposed to that.
That's correct.
Well, I didn't change it, I just left it.
Okay.
To comment on.
I saw that, and I thought it was more of a, not so much regulatory review as it was a permitting, just letting the town hall know that you were conducting business. Was more, well, that was more the way I remembered it.
Yeah, no, the discussion hinged on what we ended up referring to as the invisible home occupations, which should not require any of that.
Right, which is where.
Where we're going tonight in terms of discussion, yeah.
Right.
But that sentence, I think, is a little misleading the way it's written in the minutes.
Do you want to amend it? We talked about
Which
home
sentence,
occupations.
which sentence,
Group generally occurred.
Yeah.
How about if we just said the group generally disagreed? Sorry.
There's something new.
Never mind, or we could say, the group discussed the proposal that home occupations, or discussed whether home occupations should be subject to some level of regulatory review.
That's fine.
I think that's closer to the mark.
Sufficiently accurate.
Any other changes? Okay.
That amendment, move approval of minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous, thank you. Okay. We have before us, 4 items for discussion. Discussion of home occupations, categories of use, a proposal of, the proposed list of permitted and conditional uses that we worked on a while back, potential for design standards and future meetings. You should have 3 separate items related to home occupations. There's one that I put out, which is very, very general, and thought we could just discuss where we were going. There was one that Donna put together,
Which I haven't handed out yet, but I'm about to do so. Passing around, so we, what's it got?
which is a little more sketched out than the one that I had. It was rather vague. I thought we could, if we went down that road, we'd work on developing the different businesses that were in there. And then you should also have a letter from John Kugler, down on Riverwine, who thinks that the ordinance, the way it is written right now, is perfectly acceptable.
Could you keep that, a copy of that for me, so I'll make an extra copy?
The letter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can put it as part of.
Yep, please do. So where would you like to start today? Did you, I guess the first thing to do is decide whether or not you agree with Mr. Kugler. Is the ordinance okay the way it is? Or do we wanna take a look at making some changes?
Has there been any issues in regards to home occupations?
There've been a few. We had someone who started off as a home occupation and grew into a contract yard and created quite a kerfuffle in the neighborhood. Yes?
The impression that I have from Mr. Kugler's letter is that based upon what he read from the website that you put out, which was very abbreviated, a lot of his objections, I think, are still addressed both in the current ordinance and also in the proposal that I just put out, which is a little more fleshed out. I think your proposal was focusing only on different types of home occupations in terms of categories, as opposed to the details which it seems to me that he is looking for. And I think the details that he's looking for would still be in whatever we develop.
Oh, absolutely they would. You're right, mine was just a very brief overview of, these are the different classifications that I think we should have, but then we would have to discuss how to flesh them out.
Right.
What's going to be allowed. And I gave the example of crafters, simply because crafters, for the most part, sit in their house, they do their work, nobody knows that they're there, they're not having any kind of an impact on the neighborhood for the most part. So I was looking at going, okay, from home occupation 1, if you're not impacting your neighbors and you're not having a lot of traffic come in, do we wanna go down the road of regulating people and say, to the guy who's growing, has a small beehive in his backyard and is making honey, and he takes it up to, I don't know, take your pick of any store where they sell it. The place on 111 in Lyman, and I can't think of what the name of the place is, right there on the corner of Kennebunk Pond Road. There's a little store up there,
Yeah.
they collect stuff from all over the state of Maine and they sell it.
That's already allowed. That's already allowed in what you have now.
Yes, but and I don't wanna take that away, we wanna continue to allow that to
Right,
go
but
on.
it is already allowed.
Yes, ma'am, it is. We were just looking, I was just simply looking at saying, okay, from a home occupation point of view, what kind of classifications do we wanna have?
But I think when you start getting into daycare and stuff like that, I think that brings up other problems. I mean, I just don't know the list of what you're looking at, so.
We have to develop that list. I didn't have a list that I was working off, I was just trying to come up with some rough ideas as to what we could use. Now, Mr. Kinderen has a much more worked out arrangement. One of the things I was looking at was like, you're not gonna be doing on-site retail, you're not gonna have employees, You're not gonna have a sign, and under those circumstances, you don't even need to tell the town that you're there. You know, you're allowed to continue to do whatever it is that you were doing, because you're not having an adverse impact either on your neighbors or on the neighborhood itself. You're not generating extra traffic, you're not generating extra noise. Do we really wanna tell, I don't wanna tell my mother-in-law if she lived in town, Ma, you can't sit there and knit mittens anymore, and then take them down to the store and sell them. I like my mother-in-law.
It might be helpful for the folks who were here, who were not here at the last meeting, to maybe recap a little bit about what our discussion was the last meeting and how we got to the point where we are now. I'll be happy to start and then jump in if I left something out or messed it up. We talked mostly about two categories of home occupations. One of which we ended up just in our discussion, as I referenced before, to calling invisible occupations. In that it's something you're doing in your own home, and as Rich just described in some detail, you have no sign, you have no retail sales, and for all practical purposes, unless you told your neighbor you were doing it, they wouldn't know. And that was what we were looking at as a non-regulated, non-permitted situation, because again, unless you tell somebody, they're not going to know. And based upon that, that becomes almost an unenforceable thing if we were to decide that there was some sort of a license or registration required. Because again, unless you tell somebody, they don't know. In the course of that discussion, we spent a lot of time talking about what are the kinds of things that would adversely impact a neighbor or a neighborhood. And we talked about things like noise and odors and traffic and so on and so forth. And these very low impact in-home occupations for this first category certainly wouldn't have any of those elements either. So the list, a lot of our conversation revolved around the idea of crafters, but it could be, you know, somebody with a little woodworking shop in their basement, or somebody who made some homemade soap, a beekeeper, what have you. So as far as we were concerned, that first category, not impacting the neighborhood, was a very safe, easy thing. And I suspect that if you talk to people around town, you're going to find out there's a ton of it going on. And a lot of it nobody knows about unless somebody tells you. The second category is the one that would potentially have impact on neighbors, where there would be people coming to the house perhaps as clients, therefore some amount of increased traffic, possibly an occasional delivery truck, some potential storage of items outside. And that's where the regulation piece would come in, either through the CEO or through the planning board as a conditional type of use, so that you had to meet basically the requirements that are in the current ordinance, and therefore whatever impact there would be on the neighbors would be mitigated in some way. If you had outdoor storage of something for a period of time, it would have to be screened from view. A limit on the amount of traffic that could be increased in the neighborhood. And certainly limits on things like noise and lighting and that type of thing. So we weren't looking to make any major change in the home occupation ordinance as it stands, but simply to allow the people who are literally having no impact on their neighbors get out from under the cloud of not knowing even now they have to have a permit of some sort. Just do your thing, and rely a lot on what we used to have in this town, is just a good neighbor policy. So, you know, anybody wants to
With
add?
social media today, doesn't that change a lot of this thinking? Because you don't need a sign anymore. All you need is some sort of a social media thing. You can get people, if I'm growing marijuana in my backyard, I could have a lot of people coming over too, right? Put it on the web. I don't need a sign, they just start coming in.
Well, yes, but that's,
Traffic.
the first type that I referred to would also prohibit retail sales. So you're not going to have customers coming to the house,
Okay.
okay? At least, you know, not supposed, I mean, right now.
So they go to farmers markets or some of the.
Exactly, that's the idea, that whatever it is you're producing in your home, you would go to craft fairs, farmers markets, local establishments, as Rich referred to, that might be willing to take your stuff on consignment or whatever the arrangement is. But the idea is not to turn a local residence into a store.
So, reading type 1, In my opinion, in, number 2, it's a little too restrictive. It says that no one, the home occupation shall be carried on only by residents of the dwelling. I mean, it's perfectly conceivable that somebody has an assistant, a helper, or whatever, and I think that's why the other towns actually limit the number of, outside employees that can come and assist
Donna,
in a business.
in fairness to Donna, on the backside under type 2, she says you could have 2 non-resident employees. My home occupation 2 said you could have 1. And that 1, you would be registered with the codes enforcement officer and not have to come before the planning board. But if you had 2 or more, then you had to get a conditional use permit and you had to come to the planning board.
That's,
Right.
I
That
was
was
gonna
just,
say-
that
for
was,
type one, you're saying if they could have
I don't,
one?
we don't even, no, under Donna's for type 1, you have no employees at all. And under type 2, you could have up to 2 employees. I broke it down further, I had home, occupation 1, which has no employees, occupation 2, which has 1, and occupation 3, which would have 2 employees.
Well, if you look at our neighbors in our neighboring towns, it's, 3 is the magic, seems to be the magic number. So maybe it's the resident and 2 employees, or 2 assistants, or 2 helpers, or whatever. That still allows you to stay in type 1 of permitted use. That would be,
Well, one of
I
the,
think,
one of the things that we need to be aware of, when I talked with the codes enforcement officer last week, if he has to give you a permit for your business, he has to make sure that your house is up to code. Whatever that code happens to be, the electrical, the plumbing, whatever it is. If he's being asked to bless that, your house has to meet what's it called, something,
Yeah, it's
some
got
type
the
of
IBC,
code.
you've got a use group that, as soon as you have a non-residential use occurring in the structure under the IBC, you have to meet the use code, actually the use separations for fire or other purposes. There is some cases you have to make upgrades for electrical, and that's because of the building code.
Which to me would be,
That's-
but so what's the cutoff for that, Tad, in terms of the number of people?
It has nothing to do with.
it has nothing to do
It
with
has to do
people,
with the use.
It just has to do with
It's the
use.
use group. It's called the use group.
And it
which is
just-
why I say from a type 1, there are no employees and
Right.
you don't have to register or do anything along those lines. We're not gonna affect the grandma sitting at home making brownies, or this fella who.
What about a housekeeper that comes in every day and also assists you with your business? Would that person
If
qualify
they're
as
assisting
an
you with their
employee?
business, then they're an employee.
Housekeeper,
Housekeepers,
now, housekeeper,
Lovely.
if they're.
housekeeper, we think of being domestic, okay?
Marty, that's nitpicking. An employee is an employee, it's not a housekeeper.
Well, I'm just using the idea,
Well,
if
so
you
they
have,
could be an
you have-
employee. I mean, isn't that what,
But then they would not,
The
then they would
category
have
they
to be
fall-
registered. They would have to register with the codes enforcement officer or get a conditional use permit from the planning board.
I mean, if they have a cleaning
And-
service,
no,
We're talking about different things.
cleaning service is like an independent contractor. So they wouldn't be the same as a housekeeper
not
that
be.
came in every day that could have,
You could have a housekeeper come in every day and cook your meals for you. That doesn't mean
Right.
that you're an employee. They may be an independent contractor that travels around and,
well, technically, if they're coming every day and they spend their whole day.
well, if they're coming every day and spending all day, they're a household employee and you have other.
That's not a business being carried on the
No, it's
home.
not.
Yeah,
That's
then
a
we're off,
service.
we're
I
off
just
topic
think
now.
I think type 1 is a little too restrictive in terms of help, and from what I've read from the other towns.
But help would not fit
Well, I
into
meant
here.
help with the home occupation. I just think you should be able to have somebody come in and help without having to register the business. I think there must be a threshold that you pass.
So I think I'm coming into this, I wasn't here last week, so I was reading it. I'm always skeptical if I miss something that you probably didn't get it done right, so. But I'm looking at this now, I think it's pretty much saying, just keep doing what you're doing, it's no impact. Once you start having employees, a single employee,
Your impact.
then there's someone driving in every day, there could be building code issues, and that's where we need to begin, with
Impact.
one employee or more.
Right, and it's that impact. Chip,
Has this group considered some form of exemption for agricultural farms?
we haven't gotten to that one yet.
Specifically, well, you've gotta, if, how does a small farm that has one person who comes in for maybe a couple hours a day,
That is different than a home occupation. By definition, a home occupation takes place in the house, not a farm. Agriculture is a completely separate listing.
And it's permitted
And
already.
it is already permitted in the neighborhood. A home occupation takes place inside the building. So from an agriculture point of view, farm safety wouldn't have an impact.
Question,
Here, Mike.
as you say, employee, okay, does that mean anybody other than a family member?
Yes, it does.
Because a family member still may be helping.
And they're not considered to be an
I'm
employee.
just
No,
using that as a question.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely correct, Mike. A family member, somebody who lives in that house.
May not live in that house. That's where I'm going at.
Then they're an employee.
So what constitutes a definition of an employee? Do they have, you have to pay taxes, do they have to be, I mean,
You have to pay them an hourly wage, subject to minimum labor. You have to pay them, you have to give them a W-2, you have to file 941 payroll tax returns, you have to have workers' comp on them. All of the stuff that a business would have for an employee.
you control their work.
right, no, I understand what it is, but, you know, for a home occupation, that's a heavy load.
That's a load any business has to meet if you have one employee. It doesn't matter if you're at home or someplace else.
So if they're part-time and you've got them set up as an independent contractor, they're not employed, if they meet the requirement.
It's a slippery slope,
Yeah, I know.
that's
Yeah, it's a
the
very slippery
definition.
slope.
It's also hard to enforce, how do we know?
We don't, we're simply saying that the rule is, if you've got an employee,
Right.
because
As
we
long
can
as
go
it's
down
low-key
there,
enough,
we can go down the slope on
We don't
almost
have to
anything, how do you
follow.
enforce it?
This type one, designation is basically to get the people who in town right now currently are doing something out from under what is now a regulation that nobody's paying any attention to. This simply exempts, you know, grandma who's knitting, and your great aunt who's making jelly, and
Your grandpa making, doing woodworking, making
corporations.
yeah, these activities are going on in homes now, there's no question about it. So therefore, this is a nice, neat way of saying, if this is what you're doing in your own home, you're not bothering your neighbors, basically nobody knows what you're doing unless you tell them, we don't care either, it's not the town's business.
so will they need a
Nope.
permit, will they
No.
have to register?
No,
Not at all.
just
Good,
do your
good.
thing.
Just do your thing.
keep doing what
Yeah.
you're doing.
Yeah,
But when you add one employee, then you have to
That's
register.
different.
I think that's good.
I think at the same time, I'm not sure if we should automatically say that, because if you've got a business going on here,
That
again,
gets
the
rid of the
building
door.
code comes into impact. And even if you get a building permit from the code enforcement officer, because even if you're doing little things like that, if you're doing a business and doing certain activities in the home with a residential, you still need to meet the IBC. So the code enforcement officer really made it very clear that one of his problems that he has is that he has no idea when these things are going on until the complaints occur. So it may be a permitted use, but just like the house is a permitted use, it might be a good idea to put a requirement in there, you get a building permit from the code enforcement officer
Building permit for what?
for carrying on the activity.
Who's going to know?
Well, that's,
Where is the complaint coming from? That's really my question.
well, the thing, it's not the complaints, as far as he was concerned, I wish he was here so he could explain it much better than I can.
If he found out about it, he would have to enforce the IBC.
Right.
And you're gonna have, at which point, if you're making brownies and selling them at the local store, he's gonna enforce all of the building codes.
You like what kind of oven you have, what kind of.
What kind of electricity, what kind of firewalls, the whole those are the things that I'm trying to avoid. If you've got employees and you're doing work, that's completely different than having the homeowner making stuff at home and taking it out and selling it someplace. I just as soon avoid that, and I know that it may or may not create a problem for the codes enforcement officer, but unless he knows about it, he's not going to be chasing you down anyway.
So I have another question. So should we qualify and differentiate between an employee and a helper or an occasional assistant or an independent contractor? So you could have an assistant that comes, 10 hours a week, but they aren't technically an employee. They're an independent contractor, they go to other places to work, they bring their own tools, or,
You're gonna end up in the wrong
Tom,
side of the
should
line.
we define that? Because not everybody who works at a job is an employee, correct?
They try to make that claim often, but
They,
fail.
technically, they are all employees. You have control over what they do, when they do it, where they do it, and how much they get paid, they're an employee, and you can't win that fight. I see it all the time on tax returns, people come in with a 1099, and they work for one guy.
Well, no, I agree with that, but I mean, you could have multiple jobs in multiple places and come and assist somebody on a on a frequent basis, but not a continuous or regular basis. And so they could actually qualify as a independent contractor as opposed to
They might,
an
and
employee.
I would say at that point that we would have to clarify this to say
Well,
that
that's what I'm saying.
either a
think-
subcontractor or an employee would trigger the next level occupation.
I was just gonna say, but that would be type 2, not type 1.
Right, well, it might,
In
yeah.
terms of how we're discussing it at the moment.
It would it would give somebody flexibility in type 1 status.
No, it wouldn't.
If they technically weren't an employee, it would.
No, I would say that we need to change that,
Right.
so that it would include subcontractors or
Oh,
employees.
okay, well then that's
Well,
fine.
number 2 covers it. Home occupation shall be carried on only by residents of the dwelling unit.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you're right,
Too
it does.
restrictive.
that eliminates any variation on the employee.
Now, here's just something totally off the idea. With the home occupation, would the occupant or the one who's doing it, would they want to inform the town to turn around so that they may be able to share their knowledge? It's like beekeeping or knitting or any of these other things. That's where I'm throwing that out as a question only.
Well, you could still share your information and not need to get a permit.
Yeah, but I'm just
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
but just the idea of,
And in effect,
If
this,
they want to.
yeah,
Why
and
not?
this would allow somebody who has such a business in their home to freely say, hey, I'm doing this, if you would like to learn how, I'd be happy to help you, without having the CEO come and say, all right, now we need to check on whatever building code
Yeah.
there is.
well, like you said, with social media today, it's everybody minds everybody else's business.
Well, we need another ordinance there.
So I think your type 1 and my home occupation one mesh together very
Pretty
well.
much the same thing, yes.
I looked at it and tried to define it around employees, because having an employee is going to have the biggest impact. Now, you could be doing IT as a self-employed person and do all the connect to the internet and troubleshoot people's computers, and nobody will ever know you're there, and nobody will ever care. But if you add an employee, then you've obviously expanded out the business. Chip?
perfect example, I'm running an IT business and I have an accountant or bookkeeper who comes in once every 2 weeks.
But that's an independent contractor coming in, taking your books and leaving, or doing the books right there?
Either way, what impact does that have on my
But
neighbor?
they're not an employee, they're, you know, and they're not helping you in the business, they're actually providing a
Have a
service.
service.
So yeah, that, to me, that would be, occupation one, if you have, you know, if you're doing IT out of your house.
Please be careful and make sure
I
that
wanna-
that remains the case.
I want to address the point that a lot of people work from home, they work for other people, and they work from home. This has no impact on any of them, none, because they're not running the business. They're employees. You may work at the hospital, and they have you up there doing medical billing out of your house.
Wouldn't daycare be a business though?
Daycare would be a business,
And
yes.
that's under number one with no oversight, right?
It is under, depending on,
And that is obvious that something is going on, because, for example, on our street, we have a daycare, which has been there for a long time, and I'm not suggesting that we do away with it. But it creates a lot of traffic, and we also get traffic that goes 60 miles an hour, because the parents are always late for work, so they come and bring their kids at 60 miles an hour down our street. And the traffic is, you figure one person is making 4 trips back in front of your home, and then you add to that. And also, I want to know, is this pertaining to all zones, or it's just certain zones, for instance, like conservation zones? Should we be increasing business in conservation zones?
this started off looking at the R1 district, where it home occupations in the ordinance, in one section say that they are permitted, and in another section that says that it's a conditional use, so we're trying to resolve that problem, specifically related to the R1, but unfortunately, you have to tackle the entire issue in order to do it. Now, you commented, under Donna's type 1, there is no daycare, unless,
Okay, it
As
is
long as
on
you
the
have-
agenda,
as long as you have no employees. On this one,
I was just looking at the agenda. Daycare is mentioned on the agenda, and
Oh,
it's
no,
supposed to be
she's
that
referring
you're
to-
working.
no, you're referring to to this one that says proposed home occupations?
Yes.
Yes, type 1, I said, this was my suggestion for the group as to how we would focus on it. And home occupation 1, you would have a maximum of 3 children.
Right, and that's.
And then you
and
would
it
not,
starts- And it does start out as 3,
and the minute they go to 4, they have to register and get a license.
and who's gonna supervise that?
That's a good question. The neighbors, actually,
So you have to rat out your neighbors to
pretty much.
do this?
Let's be honest about it. The only way anybody ever finds out is when somebody complains about their neighbor.
Okay, now, this is just an example, for instance, because I think this is a slippery slope, and I think this has to be very carefully constructed, and maybe with professionals helping too. Because, for instance, when you start getting into unregulated daycare and not permitting, not going through any kind of process for getting a permit to that, in other words, the town says, here, you go ahead and do it.
Well, right now, the state of Maine does not regulate if you have less than 6.
Right,
We're saying we're starting at 4.
but I'm talking about, a lot of towns still do regulate daycare, whether if they have 3,
Okay.
4, so they still do it.
And we do too.
And you do, because if
Yeah,
something
six.
were to happen to a child, and the town has not had this group go through any kind of permitting process, what about the town's liability for that?
You bring up a good point, and that might be a good argument not to have it as a standalone category of regulation with,
I
within the
think
different
it's right.
zones.
Some of these, it looks simple when you first look at it, but some of these can bring a lot of liability to a town. And that's why I think having many eyes look at some of these is a good idea. So you don't end up creating more problems than you're trying to solve.
And that was the reason that this proposal came about. I had I'm not taking care of one kid, never mind three.
Right. Okay.
Unless you have three.
No, I had one.
Oh, unless you have three. The other questions are, you say, like daycare, okay? It may not be kids.
See,
Yep, it is.
I mean, just,
But this
Just
is something
as a
that we could
throw out.
look and say, you know, we're not gonna address that from a home occupation point of view, because we have adult daycare and we have daycare already,
pets.
We have that separate too.
at
Yeah, I
daycare.
was just gonna suggest that daycare shouldn't be in here at all.
Then we just take daycare out, all the way through.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I
This
think
is
you're
right
right.
now, it's not a home occupation, it's a separate
Okay,
use.
so we'll just take it out, which is fine.
this is the danger of the rough draft.
Right, well, that's
And
what
why
we
you-
talk about things.
Yes,
Everybody has their own experiences
Yep.
with this, and a lot of my neighbors are here tonight because we're having a particular problem in our neighborhood where, things are happening under the guise of home occupation, but it's clearly a business, it's clearly affecting the neighborhood. It affects everyone on our street. And we have brought it to the attention of the code officer, who I think feels like he's reluctant to get involved in some ways because, things are unclear, I guess. But when I look at what's on the books right now, the guy is clearly, doing illegal things, at his home. But and all these things are nice, but if they're not enforced, what's the point? You know, I think you always have to think about how they're gonna be enforced.
right, and that was part of the discussion that we had the last meeting, which is why we said, let's separate out this category where, you know, people are home knitting and making jam. You can't enforce that, nor should we need to. You know, it's basically what you're doing in the privacy of your own home.
But if nobody sees it or knows about it, then why does it even have to be there?
Because it already is in the ordinance, we're trying to separate that out and make it clear that this particular piece doesn't require the town to know or be involved.
Okay.
And that once you make it more complicated, then the town does need to know and be involved, because then it's going to have the impact on the neighborhood. So we're trying to simplify and uncomplicate, and also, I think, apply a little common sense. And that's, you know, what type 1 is the common sense piece. Because I mean, if you're home, making something in your home, and I drive by on your road at far less than 60 miles an hour, I'm never going to know what you're doing. So why should anyone else?
I guess if nobody knows what you're doing, then I guess I still come back to, I suppose it just gives them peace of mind maybe? Because if your neighbor knows what you're doing, then why would you regulate something that you don't know about?
All right, well,
That's
In this
threshold.
case,
Yeah.
we would not, we're simply defining the level at which regulation would take
Let's
effect.
take effect.
And it's going to
Where it
change the
starts.
land use ordinance by removing this section out of home occupation.
Okay,
You have to keep in mind that the use isn't permitted under the zone, it's not allowed. So even if the jam maker was operating and its home occupations are not allowed, that could be shut down. So I think Donna's trying to make it a permitted use that somebody can do and can't be shut down by the town.
Oh, that's not a violation.
Well, right.
These
Can
provisions.
I ask you a question about liability? Is there any liability to the town if there's something happens in a business and they didn't go through the appropriate permitting? Because I kind of think it would be separate, okay.
Well, you take something like active complicity.
Okay.
Just as a clarification, the employee issue has always been driven by traffic. The issue with employees is not concerning, you know, filling out your W-2s or meeting, federal tax laws. It has to do with the number of cars that appear at the house.
Okay, no, I was just answering the question regarding how do you know if they're employees.
Well, that's, so, you know, that's
For
why
for our
the
purposes, you're right.
terms we
I
use,
think
it's really important that we qualify exactly what we're talking about. So, and maybe employee is not the right word.
I think that where the traffic will be what's gonna get the attention, if someone's coming in 2 times a month doing books or whatever, it'll be, whether they're considered an employee or not,
It won't impact them.
it just won't impact. But if that same car is coming in every day and leaving, then the neighbors will notice it.
Well,
So
I think
can we
that's-
write the ordinance to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, can we write the ordinance so that it seems to be addressing traffic as opposed to, or is that a problem for
I think it
us?
currently does when it talks about ITE and trip generation. Because we're-
ITE,
International traffic.
Traffic's traffic's just one category of impact. I think we have to zero in on impact of any kind, because that's what it's all about, right?
Noise.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
there
make
is an
it
impact,
specific
then-
enough or non-specific enough that somebody could have help and not, and it might not impact traffic. But if they're qualified as an employee, and you have to have sprinklers, and you have to have inspections, and you have to have, you know, proper ventilation, or, I mean, not to say that you shouldn't have all of these things, but I'm just, you know.
where's the landscaper falling on this?
Well, see, that, I'm gonna bring that up later, that's, right now, they're exempt on their problem. But I think the issue here, we have to always remember, when Jim's talking about it's the use group, it's not the number of people, it's not even the size of the type of use, but it's the type of use. If you're a candle maker, you're making candles in your basement and selling them wholesale to Spencer gets from Leeds. Yeah, something like that. That's a different thing than if you're an accountant, you know, living away, or if you're an architect and you're, sole proprietor. It's a
Candy
different
maker.
use. Candy maker, yeah. Well, when you get into food preparation, that's a different animal altogether, because the state starts getting involved in that for food preparation. And that gets much more serious. Caterers, for instance, they have to get licensed. And if they're doing it in the home, then there has to be fire separation. And this is where the code enforcement officer gets involved, not just doing the land use law, but dealing with building code and fire code. So, the use is important, sometimes more than the employee, the number of trips, unless the number of trips is outrageous, but the use group is important to be reviewed. And so there needs to be some mechanism in which the code enforcement officer ensures public safety, or that person's safety, and make sure there's adequate safety for the use in storing ammunition. We have gunsmiths, who are, that's different than fly tie rod, the guys who do fly rod, because of the nature of the materials they work with. And so that's where Jim gets involved, as a code enforcement officer. I said about the contractors, the problem there is again, that's, one of the problems we've encountered from an enforcement standpoint is that all business, the intent of home occupations is to allow people not only to have a cottage industry that supplements their income or they find enjoyable, but it's also to be an incubator space for new businesses in the town. You start off with your business, and clearly the contractor one is an example. The problem is that often contractors or any business starts expanding, starts growing, starts succeeding, and they start expanding. The intent is for them then, when they exceed that 25% threshold, or they need more employees, then to move to another facility, preferably in the business district, in which then they can do the expansion, and there's fewer restrictions, or no restrictions on parking or traffic or noise for that. There's higher standards for noise. The problem is that if there's no way of keeping that, notifying them of those thresholds, often they can make investments into their property that they won't be able to recoup at a later date. Let's say somebody complains, and we go in and say, oh, you're 50%, you put in all this equipment, you've made all these improvements, tear them out. You gotta take them out. And that's a loss to that person. That's a loss of their business investment. So in a way, it's also intended to make sure that people don't get caught in that trap. And we've seen that trap occur
probably a losing argument, but I would make the argument that contractors are not home occupations. Our definition of home occupation says that you're using the structure, you're using that house as, to do your business. That doesn't mean that you get to load your equipment up and go someplace else. That's not a home occupation. That's a contractor yard.
I agree with you, I think contractor yards are, just like daycare, it's a separate
It's a
animal.
separate animal.
Yes. And I think making it a separate animal solves a lot of these questions.
Mhm.
Because after you pull out the obvious things that historically have caused problems in town between neighbors, or certainly have the potential to do that, then you are left with what is basically an innocent pool of activities for home occupations.
I got a
You
question.
have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, over on Riverwide where I live, we have a situation where a new resident, moved in, and sometimes there's 6 vehicles there, sometimes there's 8 vehicles there, sometimes there are 11 vehicles there.
He has a fleet,
He's got a fleet of cars,
transportation fleet.
and they leave during the night sometimes, they leave during the day
Shuffle them
sometimes.
around, send them out to satellite
Uh,
places.
And he claims he's not running a business.
He claims his business is located in Biddeford, and it is not located in Biddeford, he was kicked out of Biddeford.
That sounds to me like a codes enforcement issue.
The code enforcement person, I don't know him, I probably should know him, but apparently he doesn't wanna do much about it.
He wants us all to keep an eye on him, but I don't know really what that means.
What are you gonna do?
It's
Do you file
not
a
good.
complaint or what?
Chip,
And
what is he doing? Cars
he
or-
has a
He's got-
transportation fleet.
Yeah, he's got sometimes he has vehicles that have, tags on them that they're cabs. Some are unmarked, some are this, some are
He's
that.
taken off the
He's got-
taxi light off one of the vehicles when he knew the code officer was coming.
Yeah, he's got,
But the other ones are for the summertime when people have to go to the airport and everything else.
he's got
They
fleet
can ship it
vans
around.
and stuff like that.
And your rules right now say he can't be doing that. But again, some of this stuff, if it's not enforceable, I think that's a big component that
You
has
guys
to be
take a picture?
discussed.
Oh, sure, I can take as many
Get one
pictures as
tomorrow.
you want.
Take up a neighborhood collection and hire a private investigator.
Well, that's not, if we get all these vehicles.
It's not our responsibility, it's the town's responsibility, I feel.
Yeah, that's not our
It's not, we don't have to hire a
We're just
private
letting you know what's going on.
Yes, but again, we have lodged complaints. In fact, I've talked to all the neighbors and they're all disgusted and property values have come up, and I've talked to Tad about it, and he said, usually this doesn't affect property values, but in this town, I like to think that I know that does, because been doing real estate here for a long time, and I know a lot of brokers that I could get letters from tomorrow that say, yes, it does affect our property values. It's a fleet of sometimes 11 vehicles, some of them are in the street at night, the shuffling goes around at nighttime.
Does he have drivers, or is it just him?
He has, I've been told he satellites them to drivers, so somebody might come at night, pick one up. He's running a business, and it has disrupted, I think Ben lives across from this. It has clearly affected his values and mine, everybody else's, and Louis and Chip's. And it's not just that, it's hideous. I mean, it is a blight. But again, we can talk about all these things, but if nobody's gonna enforce this, really, and I don't think it's our job to get a detective. I think that's what the code office is for.
Maybe your job to gather some evidence, like taking photos and bringing that information either to the code enforcement officer or the town manager.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
So like that.
the reason that half of us are here in this little segment is that we wanna make sure that these rule changes aren't going to be inadvertently, allowing this to happen.
conservation district, we're right on the river. I mean, and he's cleaning these vehicles with chemicals and everything else. I mean, I just really hope that, I agree with Ben, that we're not going to write this to the point where it says et cetera is allowed, and he's claiming this is his home occupation. So I'm praying that things are written correctly, so that if we wanna take action as a neighborhood, we have paperwork to back us up.
Now, here's another question for you. Possibly also as a backup for what you were speaking of. You may have a covenant deed, and it says it could not, things could not happen. I'm just,
We used to be deed restricted, when I first moved into the neighborhood in '91, put those, everything's lapsed and.
I'm just thinking of,
Yeah.
I mean, as something that you're out, is protection, I mean, everything
But
else.
I have spoken with my husband, and he said you're far better off with good rules and regulations from the town than any covenant deeds, because they really are what is the meat of
Yeah,
whether
but
or
of
not you
course,
can do it.
over the time, the properties have changed and everything else, but some people don't know it was still in there, that's what I'm trying to go. I mean,
I wish we could.
and is there advertisement on these?
Yes, there's an advertisement on them.
There's lettering.
These are vans, big vans, commercial vans.
Yeah.
I agree with Tom, you should start taking pictures, somebody should keep a
And
log
I
on
offered to
these.
do that.
Cars go in and
Yeah.
out,
Sure.
and so
Yeah.
when you
And
speak
I
to
offered to
people,
do
when
that,
you notice
and
them.
the code officer said it wasn't necessary.
Well, but so,
But-
then, you know, what can I say, he may not be your only person, that can provide, you know, satisfaction and help for you.
Okay.
So if he doesn't work out, then you look for another place to go. But in the meantime, at least you've got evidence
Yeah.
of what's happened, both, you know, photographic and documentation with a log, that you
Well-
guys are keeping in concert with one another so that you each corroborate, you know, the information that the other has, and that at least gives you some kind of,
And how long should we be doing this before?
well, I don't know,
somebody-
Tom's a lawyer, but, I think you keep it for a while. I mean, how long did you
Well,
guys
I
keep a
was-
log for?
We still have a log, and I guess where is the right place to go if the code enforcement officer is very reluctant to do any kind of inspection, despite the fact that it was written into the selectmen's consent agreement? Because we have had zero support of all the complaints that we've had with video evidence of it going anywhere.
What's that Google Earth?
So what's the next?
This is outside the parameters, I think.
Two
It's
months
I know,
sold,
but-
Right, so I don't have the
Very
answer to
interested
that,
in
but maybe go to Tad and, you know,
If you're
someplace
not
else.
getting any
will-
satisfaction, the town manager is your next step.
Okay.
Yeah,
And after
that
town
sounds good,
manager,
probably.
we
He's gonna bring it to the board.
Okay, selectmen?
Right.
Okay.
That's what we're gonna do, guys. We're going to-
Okay, let's bring this back around.
Security camera.
No, no,
Sorry
thank
to
you very
hold
much.
up the show, but
Sorry.
we're all glad you're
So
aware.
we're,
That's our intent, I'd say.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's what I thought.
I would like to see it struck personally,
Right.
because it's the source of so many problems.
Right.
What is it?
which one? Which one?
This
Well,
note
it's the
makes no
exemption
sense.
for,
Oh, for
contractors.
contractors, yeah.
Because, I mean, two-wheel vehicle can be a dump truck, a two-axle vehicle can be a dump truck, which can be noisy.
Yes, it can.
Yes, it can, and there's absolutely no regulation, they're exempt. And quite frankly, we have many, there's an example of something that grows. You have a business that grows. You start off as a let's say, a landscaper, and you have one mower and one trailer. You get successful, you have two. Your brother-in-law comes and helps you out on Saturdays. Then you start getting other equipment. You might get a Bobcat. It's two axles. You know, it's not a problem. And then what happens is basically you evolve into a real contractor yard instead of a small home occupation, I mow lawns, it grows. And, under this ordinance, there's first of all, no registration. The town clerk is, the town assessor is not getting any personal property on any of this, except that which is registered under excise. And then there's the neighbors start start noticing that it's affecting quality in the neighborhood. And then it's the problem that you're discussing here, okay, tracking the guy down, following him up, and the idea would be, instead of having to do enforcement, why don't we make sure that this doesn't happen in the very beginning by saying, okay, you can do this here, and you can do this, and do this under these circumstances, and you get a permit to do it. And then you know where they are, and then you know what they're doing, the assessor knows that what the equipment is, and the taxes are paid, and if there's an issue, then there's a mechanism called permit withdrawal, or 80K, which can ameliorate the situation if there's a violation.
So when we do,
I have a suggestion, actually.
okay,
The definitions of home occupations seem to be revolving around the number of employees. Perhaps it would be good, specifically for the home occupation one, to have a limitation of one vehicle, which is used in whatever one vehicle of no more than 2 axles and no more than gross vehicle weight of, fill in a number.
to me, that would create the problem of saying, well, I live there, my wife lives there, I've got 2 teenage kids that live there, so I've got at least 3 vehicles in the house. I'm not gonna,
I said, vehicle involved in the business.
none of those vehicles are involved in the business, they're all registered personally. I think that would be an almost impossible condition to meet.
Well,
And
that's
it's-
part of-
I disagree, but.
I mean, kind of what we're in also is the code officer, when he spoke to our neighbor, he said, well, these vehicles are registered in my children's names. And one child is 2 and one child is 3 and, it's got commercial printing all over it. And I guess when, he also will tell you he doesn't speak English if the conversation gets annoying, so. It's not good, it's just it's a mess.
As we've said, get some pictures, take them to the codes enforcement. If you get no satisfaction there, go to the town manager, and if you get no satisfaction, take it to the board of selectmen.
Okay,
Because those are the processes to go through.
okay,
The only other option is I don't know, can they go directly to ZBA?
ZBA deals with the appeal of a decision by the
Okay.
code enforcement officer. You could appeal, if the code enforcement says, I'm not gonna enforce that, or I don't believe this is a violation, that can be appealed. And you would go to ZBA and appeal his decision, his interpretation of the law. You can do that.
It's gonna come down to quantity and quality of evidence.
It's
Right,
all
just
the-
document what you're doing with each
Yeah.
other and watch what's going on.
The other thing is, I know you're not gonna sit up 24 hours a day, but the fact is, if you have like a security camera of taking motions,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
We're gonna-
that's right.
Okay, I'm gonna bring this
Sorry.
back around. So when we look at home occupation 1, I'm gonna use type 1, because actually type 1 is better than what I had.
You're using Donna's, not.
I'm using Donna's type 1, which is she's fleshed it out better than I did. My question to you guys is whether or not you think that's a good idea. First off, is it a good idea to separate home occupations and have different levels of criteria? And if so, I like this one, this is everything that I was thinking of, she just did it. She must have been talking to a wordsmith.
Reading your mind.
No, you wouldn't have written anything like this if you had read my mind.
So, the only change I would make in number 5 is find a different phrase than create greater traffic than normal. Because I think normal is really a problem and very subjective, perhaps, so maybe we can find a different way of saying that so that traffic patterns, existing traffic patterns, or historical traffic patterns or, because I don't know what normal is, and I think it could be a problem.
I think it would base it on trip generation for the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we go too far down that road, if you think about the types of businesses that this describes, where you have no on-site retail, so you don't have customers coming to the house, you have no employees coming to the house, just by the nature of that, you can't be increasing the traffic in the neighborhood a lot.
I just think that the word normal should be used.
I don't think the word normal should be in the ordinance anywhere.
I do too, I
But that's
agree.
just
I
sarcasm.
think you should take normal out.
Well, this is the existing language,
Yeah,
is
it
it
is.
not?
Yeah,
Right.
I
I think normal is
didn't
not a
create
good-
that, but I don't disagree with you, but there's probably a
Customary.
better way to say it.
Customary.
Customary,
What
or
if we would say
historical,
that
or
home
To
existing.
Donna's point, it should create no traffic, period.
Well,
Right.
yes,
Well,
What
actually,
if they
no
have
additional, no
deliveries and
increase.
like-
No traffic at all.
Right.
No traffic.
Well, it will if you have a business, let's say you have an account,
Deliveries.
well, here's,
Shouldn't we have it delivered?
let's say you're an architect, sole proprietor architect, you work up in your study. You gotta go out
yeah.
to meet clients, and then you're gonna come back, and you're gonna go out to a site, and then you're gonna come back, and so you are gonna, technically, you probably are gonna increase, you're gonna have some small increase in the amount of traffic that you're gonna generate, you're probably
If
gonna
I was
exceed the
going to an
10.
office, I'm gonna be doing the same thing.
Right, I think what
exactly,
Tom is
exactly.
saying is that there's a certain level of existing traffic
Right.
and that, you know, it shouldn't create traffic. Because what goes on a regular basis living there, it would not necessarily be considered, I don't know.
Right, and what's the
Well,
difference
yeah,
between
yeah,
the
that's a lot of
UPS
traffic.
truck coming to deliver some purchase that I made as an individual, as opposed to the same UPS truck coming to deliver something I need for my business?
Yeah.
There isn't a difference.
No.
You know,
But that's a delivery, I guess, you know, so you're gonna distinguish that in the ordinance.
not in there.
Well,
because-
It would be
No.
part of the ITE, part of the trip generation.
Okay.
I generate more trips now that I'm semi-retired than I did when I worked full-time, because when I worked full-time, I left the house and I didn't come back until 5 at night. I'm now in and out of my house 3 or 4 times a day.
Well, it all comes back to impact, and there isn't impact, and we don't worry about it.
but I do like the word customary there instead of normal.
Customary, how about if something like, creates traffic greater,
Then custom-
materially greater than
Or
customary to the
substantially
area?
greater, nah, that's.
Well,
Materially greater?
That's too much.
immeasurable.
Yeah,
All of them
not
are,
like that.
unless we have something like,
It doesn't
we have a trip generation.
exceed current traffic patterns, I don't know.
But,
They will.
and what are you measuring that against? I mean, if somebody in the neighborhood just has a baby, it increases the
14
traffic.
daughters.
If you have 3 teenage daughters, exactly, that traffic's gonna be-
To Tad's
Been through
point,
that.
to Tad's point in something like this, yeah, because you don't know how many people live in the house, so you can't, how do you regulate the trips? We can't say, well, you can have 10 ITE, which means you can have somebody come in and out 5 times. Well, you're already gonna have people leaving the house, going places, to go to the grocery store, or to go to the post office.
Well, I came up with discrete, so I'll leave it to the rest of you to come up with another term. But normal, I think, is a problem.
I think
Customary.
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 Customary is fine with me.
I don't know how we're gonna enforce that.
Oh, you're not.
But
Well, yeah, you couldn't enforce it if it exceeded normal patterns either, so.
No, right now, the way it's written, it's unenforceable.
Well, but there's nothing to enforce here, because this is grandma home knitting.
Or it's the
Right,
architect going
that's
out.
right.
And if
That's
she's
right.
home knitting, she's not leaving the house to go to bingo,
When
or
we
a
start
Wild West
looking
trip.
at,
Or it's a wetland scientist who's going out to the jobs and coming back.
and when we start looking at, people with employees, then we can start looking at the ITE and
Yeah,
say,
that's a different,
That's
Now
why
we can
I like
generate- because-
historical too.
because if you've got an
Yeah.
employee, odds are you have customers coming to
So,
your business.
anyway.
Maybe not, maybe not. I mean, if that's a secretary, let's say somebody who's just answering your phones while you're out, they're not going anywhere.
So, is this distilled down to, we have changed one word in type 1?
it's under
Pretty
number
much.
5.
I think the question is, are you guys satisfied with type 1? Can
I
we
like
work at adding that in?
Yeah, I like it.
Good job.
Delete,
I like it.
And
Yes,
delete the note.
delete the note, yeah, that's why I put it in italics, in the smaller font, that needs to
If any-
How about dealing with just getting the building permit from the code enforcement officer?
If you don't go to need a permit, he's not
Not in
gonna,
type
they issue a
one.
permit, he's not gonna go there to inspect
Right,
anything.
this is invisible, you don't know this is happening.
The neighbors are not impacted and they're not calling.
And you, as I said at the last meeting, if you go to town meeting and inform the people in this town that every grandmother who's knitting and selling mittens, and everybody who's making a little jam and selling it on the side at a craft fair needs to now get a permit, there will be blood on the gym floor. No.
And
If
I
you flip
hate
it
to-
on the opposite side, you could also have the problem where you don't, where, this would allow certain kinds of businesses that can generate a lot of impact on noise and so forth, then you're gonna have the flip side
Well,
impact as well.
I think we can take our cues a little bit from our neighbors in surrounding towns, and that is, what they omit to cover is exactly what's described in permitted use number 1. And it's when the businesses, the home businesses, all of a sudden are not discreet and are impacting the neighborhood, the traffic, the noise, the whatever it is, then all of a sudden, those are the things that cause these towns to define those businesses over and above what's in, like, for instance, permitted use 1.
Would number 3 be a good catch-all for all those concerns? Shall,
Yeah.
may not alter the residential character and
Yep.
change the character of the lot.
You might wanna include some examples, like increased noise,
Well, it could be great.
Smells.
Well, that's the other thing, I mean, some of the ordinance requirements in here have to be, I mean, noise can be a huge issue.
Mhm.
Odors can be a
Right.
huge issue. So
lighting.
lighting is huge.
What about structural alterations to the structure itself in order to accommodate the business?
Then you'd have to get a permit.
It has to be a building.
Even if it was
Yeah,
only
you need
25% and it was still being
Absolutely, yeah.
used
I
as
got
a resident.
notified,
Yeah.
that fella next to me's putting a dormer up, and he had to get a building permit.
Sure.
So maybe I would say that it has to, you shall not violate.
Or adversely impact the
Yeah.
residential.
Violate
character.
the section 5, which is the
Yeah.
one that
Well, I
says-
took that out, which it had been in, because it didn't make sense to have it here based upon what this was. But if
put
you
it in
phrase
there,
it
covers
phrase
it.
it as a negative, you can't violate performance standards.
Well, you could
Or-
do, that shall apply. Or you can't violate it,
Walters.
whichever way you want it, negative or positive.
Here's a
How'd you
thought,
like it?
daytime,
Like it like that, but.
just so it would be during the daytime, not necessarily a home occupation that would be done during the daytime, not necessarily in the evenings or which would affect lights or whatever else. I mean, it's just, it's a throw, it's a throw out.
If someone's knitting at midnight,
No, they can do it, but I'm just saying for traffic wise or anything else,
yeah,
daytime, I mean,
I think that needs to be in 1. I actually feel that number 3 takes care of all the noise. I just feel that the residential character and neighborhood,
Yeah.
that implies to me noise, smells negatively impacting. I think it's good as is.
Well, they're gonna apply anyways, the point is just to alert them to them,
so.
because they're gonna apply.
But we can go on and
Could
on
be
and on.
included as examples such
Yeah,
as
yeah,
noise.
you
or-
just say you don't violate the.
Don't violate
the
section
performance
five.
standards of
Right.
section 5.
I had to look at section 5, figure
Yeah.
out that you,
Performance standards.
and I'm slightly aware of what that means, but with someone that's
No.
making honey at home though,
No,
So-
but
so
what it
maybe
does is
some-
it also just notifies them if they say, well, what's in
just a
5?
few,
What's in 5? Well, it's noise, it's lighting, it's, you producing any odors. I mean, just, if you recall, well, you weren't part of that, but one of the things the neighbors were concerned about, the guy who was gonna do a home brewery, was the odor.
So they'll look up what number 5 is.
Yeah, they'll look at what.
be
months.
good, just as like a heads
Well,
up
at
for
least it's a
those.
fallback for the
Tom,
town.
this is more of an enforcement issue, I mean, when somebody does complain, the gym can go out and
And
say,
the cup-
You're in violation.
you
Yeah.
can't do
Okay.
this. It's not
So
something
these-
to look at before they open the shop, I don't think.
All right.
No.
They might ask.
Yeah.
They might ask, and we could show them what it is. Here you go, noise, dust, odors, vibration, light.
So is somebody with a leaf blower in violation of section five? Section five?
something we might.
Some weekends I think it should be.
The guy who owns his lawn 3 times a week.
No, because he's not, that's not a
Not a
business.
business.
Well,
Yes, a landscaper, or something.
well,
That's
I would make the
I-
argument that the
part
landscaper using a leaf blower in his own house is not a violation.
but maybe it should be. Part of my issue with this is, we all have neighbors.
Yep.
And I'm sure that at various times in our lives with various neighbors, we have all had issues with those neighbors, as in, geez, I wish you wouldn't do that at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. But it's part of living in a community, which is why I have concerns always about over-regulating. And this home occupation thing is something that has been historically accepted in this town. A lot of people are involved in it on a lot of different levels, and if we over-regulate it, then we're doing a disservice to the people in the town. And that's my basic requirement in terms of let's keep this simple and apply common sense here.
Agreed.
Just out of curiosity, you don't enforce these things anyways. What's the point? I
Well-
don't understand. This could be a TV show for crying out loud. I mean, really? Just listen to yourselves, really.
Well, sometimes we're, being on the planning board, we're as frustrated as you are, because we make all the regulations, but it
But
doesn't
you
mean
don't
they're gonna be
enforce
followed. That's
Actually,
always an
we
issue.
just did
That-
enforce something that
No,
new, but.
We didn't enforce it.
Well, we
didn't
didn't,
issue
well,
the
we
permit.
had,
Oh,
we
you
went to
didn't,
the,
but you did.
we went to the rules and regulations and we were able to
Enforce it?
enforce it, and it did
It's a lot of
happen.
work for the neighbors.
You deny the application, but the enforcement is a separate piece.
That's correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we did our part by denying the application.
Denying expansion.
Can't you just leave these people alone that are doing stuff at home?
Yeah, as long as
Just leave them alone.
as long as the
it
neighbor
remains a
isn't
home-
bothered.
And as long as it remains a home
But you
occupation.
got a room full of neighbors here who are bothered by somebody
I
who's
agree.
doing something at home.
Yeah, but this sounds like a real serious violation.
But he's doing it at his home.
One guy does
I
zero.
don't disagree.
He's doing it at his home.
So our issue comes in, if we don't have an ordinance that says that you can't do it, then you, go ahead. You do it, and the codes enforcement officer says, well, there's nothing there that prevents you from doing it, and he's got nothing to do from enforcement. We need to be able to craft an ordinance that says, you can do this, however, there are conditions that apply, various regulations that you have to pay attention to. And the only time it becomes an issue is when the neighbors complain and say, you're doing something wrong. Because if we don't put in something in there, and the neighbors complain, the codes enforcement officer's gonna go, okay, what am I supposed to do? It creates a problem. So we have to come up with these, we have to come up with a thing that says your neighbor can't have a gas station next door to your house.
And then we say, why we need a code officer, because that would be the next thing, is if you didn't.
Yeah, Joe.
Very quick question, I may be off base, but if someone were to raise animals that generated wool of some sort, and that wool was made into yarn and then hats.
That is an agricultural use,
That is
not a home occupation.
That is not, okay.
Okay, so are you guys happy with type 1?
Yeah.
Okay. It gives us something that we can proceed on with from there. So let's take a look at type 2. And this is where Donna and I came up with differences. You know, she says 2 employees, I say, we have 2 different categories, one for 1 employee and one for 2 employees. And it was, more than anything, it would have been the kind of business and the amount of traffic that was generated. Now, in Donna's case, she's looking at it going, you know, you could have a non-illuminated sign, You can have product, sale of product which is limited to that which is grown, raised, crafted, assembled, prepared, or substantially altered. So I could grow some corn in the back and I could make some cornbread.
Well, this is
That's
basically,
catering.
this is basically what's in the existing ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah, and the reason that, in number 2, the reason I have 40 underlined is that's the number that's in the existing ordinance, and I thought that was probably something we would want to discuss
Yes.
specifically.
Seems a little large.
Yeah.
The difference that,
Retail stores that have 40 trees.
the primary difference that I had in here was that under one use, you'd go to the codes enforcement officer and you get a permit. If you've got 2 employees, you're coming to the planning board under conditional use. And that's primarily the difference that I had between what Donna has and what I was looking at.
Donna's, with 3 did come in, for conditional use.
With 3, there would be a home occupation.
Because two employees would be the limit.
So it could never be a home occupancy with 3
Right.
employees.
Does acreage include everything in this? I mean, if this is in the R1,
But we're talking about a home occupation, something you
I'm
do
just
in the building.
It's still the same
What's the
percentage.
trip, Tad, is it coming and going, or is it just one?
Just one.
Okay, so somebody, so 2 employees then would contemplate, just, in and of themselves would be 4 trips, just associated with those 2 employees.
At least, because they could go to lunch and come back and, do you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
So,
Run errands and come back, make deliveries and come
get
back.
supplies.
that 40 needs to be a fraction of what it is here.
Well, unless they have customers coming to the house.
Which brings up the question, what are we thinking about? Let's use some real uses here. Would that include a hair salon? Jim and I have argued constantly about a dentist's office in a residential neighborhood, dentist's office. So I say, it's close, and he says, no, it isn't, that's too much.
Well, with dentist's office, a lot of times you're also dealing with radiology and.
Yeah. And that's, so why don't we start with the hairdresser? I mean, the hairdresser, 1 seat, hairdresser, you're gonna have 1 person in the seat, 1 person waiting, perhaps, maybe an assistant. Is that the kind of level that we're talking?
That's a business.
Yeah, it is a business, and the issue, it's a home, but there's many that are done.
It's supposed to be professional people for home occupation originally.
Well, that's the question. I mean, that's a personal service, or personal services are included, or are we only talking about office uses? Retail uses, I mean, if people can come and buy things, there's certain retail uses that are limited in scope in terms of what is produced and sold on the site. But services are the ones that we usually get for home occupations. What kind of services?
Yeah, I would argue that retail would not be appropriate in a home office.
Home office or home business?
Home business, actually, in a home occupation, I would argue that retail would be inappropriate.
If they're selling mittens or something, or, just
Woodcraft.
woodcraft, yeah, just some.
Crafts, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if you got
Christmas
someone that's a
ornaments.
Canoes.
if you have someone that's a hairstylist, they have product, they're gonna have conditioner, relaxer, whatever.
But that's an accessory, that's incidental to the primary purpose of
That's
taking care of
service.
your hair.
We're talking about services versus product sales. Services being commercial services, being personal services, a hairdresser would be a personal service. Dog groomers would be a personal service. Are those appropriate in a home setting? That would be the first one, and then we can move on to retail.
I mean,
But I think
person
service is what we get the most of.
Person could go in and stop in, not get their haircut, but go in and buy a bottle of.
Yeah, that would be still pretty incidental. I don't think that's the primary
Okay.
purpose.
I don't suppose we have a list of currently known home occupations in town, or in this case specifically R1, since that's what we're focusing on.
The only ones, I have a list of the ones that, that we permitted,
Well,
that come to us for permitting in the past.
all right, well, because that would sort of give us an idea of, you know, what is currently out there as
I think
opposed to flying blind here.
Kenny Bunk and York, have a specific list.
Yeah, but I wanna know what a Rundle
Oh,
people
I
are
don't
doing,
know.
that was the purpose of my
Right.
question.
Right, so,
You know, I mean, cause if we, let's say just for the sake of argument, that in R one, as a discrete part of town, we had, you know, 10 hairdressers. And for whatever reason, we say, no hairdressers. Well, now we've got 10 residents who have a problem. I don't wanna do that.
They would be grandfathered, wouldn't
Yeah, but it still creates the problem of what happens next, so to speak. I'd like to get a feel for the people that we're talking about, as opposed to just putting something on paper because it looks good on paper.
Right. I can tell you that we have, let's say, I know of 2 gunsmiths, okay?
Okay.
One who manufactures automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons, another one that does rifles.
He puts them together.
You know, somebody he assembles.
Don't worry, BATF will be talking to you.
I've already, we're friends, they've talked quite a bit to me. We licensed them, we gave them a license, we gave them a permit.
What do you mean you're friends? You're friends with the ATF or him?
The ATF.
The ATF.
Well,
They called enough. The background check was, they did a background check on me too.
And we're still friends?
I know. You're still here.
for the town?
Well, walk
I
into
have
that one,
cousins in
didn't you?
ATF, yeah, but I have cousins in ATF, I'm covered.
I think the reason why I said it's worthwhile looking at the other lists, so that it might not cover everybody who currently has home businesses in Arundel, but it also opens the door to other
Yeah,
possibilities.
no, I don't disagree with that.
So I don't think we should, you know.
Clarifying the reason for my question,
Right,
that's all.
I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, but if we wanna come up with a list, I
Yeah.
think we should look, because we might get some ideas
Mhm.
of ones we don't want and ones we might wanna include, so that we're not, you know, so exclusive, just specifically right now to Arundel.
Yeah. I just didn't wanna cut the rug out from, pull the rug out from under something.
No, I
that was
agree with
already
you,
good.
I totally agree with
Yeah,
you.
I'll see if I can put that together, I can get together with the town clerk and see if I can put something together on that. I will tell you just from experience, a lot of the ones we have are automotive based. And contractors are probably our biggest one, are contractors.
Well, that's one which you probably just sort of pull out.
Yeah.
No, I think we have to be careful, just pulling it out.
Well, not making it impossible to do, but not putting it as a home occupation, because of the nature of the, you know, the vehicular traffic and it's not in the building, so to speak.
I don't think just because
It
they're
would
contractors,
be
that's
hard
not
to
enough. We
clarify.
gotta go back to impact.
Correct.
But they could be permitted, as opposed to the ones that are discrete.
Permitted if they make an impact. They don't make an
Okay.
impact, and we don't.
No, that's true.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, look at an electrician,
correct.
he's in and out with his truck only. I mean,
But he's not a home occupation, guys. Home occupation means it's taking place in the building.
Well, it is, the
No,
electrician
an
has an
electrician
office.
is not.
Well,
He's got a
Part of
small
it
little
is.
space where he's doing his billing, and he might have some supplies out in his
Storage.
garage, but he's operating out of his truck. He's getting in that truck, and he's going away, and he's doing his work, and he comes back at the end of the day. He's not like the auto mechanic who is doing it in his garage.
well, what's wrong with that?
I'm not saying there is anything wrong with that, I'm saying
Everybody
that
likes to
you
put
can't,
that on.
the electrician does not compare to an auto mechanic. He does not compare to the, he's more like the guy who mows lawns and has a 42-inch lawnmower that he rides up onto a riding trailer and he goes away. And he goes and he sees all of his clients and then he comes back at the end of the day. They're not doing, I honestly don't think that they're home occupations because they're not doing work in the home. And our definition, an occupation or use carried on for financial gain as an accessory use in a dwelling or structure that is attached. They're not doing this work in the house or
No,
in
they're in the garage.
the mechanic might be.
No, the contractor might be, he might be fixing his lawnmower.
That's
Oh, yeah.
that's not where he's doing the work. He's going out someplace else to do the work. And that's,
There's also the storage of the equipment on the property.
and it, that's a contractor yard one issue, that's not a home occupation. Based on our definition of home occupation, that's not there,
So you're saying they are relegated to truck contractor yards then?
yes.
Oh, I thought you were arguing that.
Oh, no, they are
I thought
contractor
we were in a
yards.
circle there.
No, I like that too.
That's it. You got a question?
I just wanna clarify, so a plumber, whose wife does his bookkeeping,
Yep.
and he has one truck, and he's not growing his business, and he doesn't have any employees, but the truck stays at his house when he's not out on calls, and all his bookkeeping is done in his house. You're saying that's a contractor yard one?
I'm saying it's not a home occupation.
Well, what is it?
I would say it would more appropriately be labeled a contractor yard one. I don't see it as a
Say it's
home
neither.
occupation.
It's just someone going to work.
Okay,
Well, you
then you
were-
say it's just a guy going to work.
Once you start storing things and making repairs,
That's
then
what
it
he's gonna be
changes, yeah.
He's gonna be storing
They all
stuff,
store it.
they all store their equipment
Well, I
and
guess.
their supplies.
you
We
might-
all store stuff.
Yeah.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe just look at this from the back end. And instead of trying to develop something and then see where the occupations fit in, why don't we start and go back to Susan's suggestion with a list of occupations? What do we actually have in town that we know of, and what other ones are out there? And then look at the list and say, these logically fall into this category, and these logically fall into that category, and develop it from there.
Would that list be part of the ordinance, or just for us to have something to go by?
Initially, this was a working list in terms of what I'm suggesting.
Okay, I think it'd be good to keep it that way, because once we put it in here, then
Right, yeah.
it's
Carved in
noticed.
But every town also has a TBD, which means that if it's not listed, you have the opportunity to go and explain what it is that you wanna have blessed, and the town, you know, decides whether or not it's an appropriate
The
use.
list could be including but not limited to.
That's right,
Right.
including but not limited to.
Yeah, cause we say,
Yeah, of
fine.
course, I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it should be static,
Good.
I mean,
As
it
long as
needs to
some-
be
yeah.
a living document.
right
A lot
now,
of
if
times
you
it
look at the
becomes
list, it
static
says
once it's in.
other similar uses.
Yeah, it's the code enforcement officer has the call.
Right.
Yep.
Assuming that's where you're going.
Right, as things evolve, I mean, the list is gonna change, because.
But also too, haven't we had the problem with, if it's not listed, it's not allowed, or if it doesn't have a definition, it's not allowed.
No, but if we
I'm
include in
just-
the
I'm
list
just-
that it's not limited to, then you have
It would
an
be similar
opportunity.
uses.
There are examples that you looked at.
It would be similar, instead of being cited specifically, they'd be hairdresser, barber,
Yeah.
or similar uses.
Yeah.
That's how you,
So
it wouldn't be caught
I'll
in the
get you that
omitted
list,
uses.
I'll get, there's a few of them, they don't vary a lot, but
Yeah.
it's
But I think
worthwhile.
that it would be worth looking at.
Yeah.
I agree.
How about a masseuse? Is that a home occupation? I'm just throwing that out
If
as,
you're doing it in your house, yeah.
There's a little lamp post.
Are the basic pieces that we have to type to something we can work with at least? Yeah, as I said, that's basically what's in the ordinance now with a few adjustments.
We can, I agree with Pat, I think the ITEs are too high.
Yeah,
And
7 needs to work.
So what
I
about
still think
retail
we need to look
sales?
at this, whether or not we want one employee or two employees.
And the type of uses, because the type of uses will
Yeah.
determine the ITE, or the ATT actually.
Would there be any retail use allowed, because this isn't a farm stand, so, would public be able to go there and
Oh, actually, that was something I was gonna ask about. If we're looking at this specifically for R1 at the moment.
Correct.
Maybe in R1, it would be sensible to disallow retail establishments. But it might not be a bad idea to be able to include them in R2 or R4.
Well, in
So-
R one, just put type one. those are your permitted uses in the
Well,
R1.
we may wanna go further than that, but my point is we might make a distinction between R1 and the others.
We might need a third category.
Well, no, that's okay, I'm reading it.
I don't have a problem. We can do it.
Now we'll go to 4.
17.
It's all, it's all on paper.
Okay, yeah, that's a valid point. But I think, can we work out all of the various classifications and then say, well, in the R1, we're going to allow this? Because we're gonna have to work them all out.
Yeah.
So we might as well figure out what they're gonna look like and then say, okay, in the R1, this is what's going to be allowed, and you can't do retail in the R1.
Yeah, all right, so one possible variation is retail versus no retail.
Well, I think you should say retail establishment, because people conduct a retail, quote-unquote, retail business and may not have any foot traffic.
Could all be online.
It could all be online, it could all be
Right.
shipping, it could all be done
Yeah.
through UPS.
Yeah.
So I think you need to define the fact that
So,
it's,
no
you're talking
on-site retail.
on-site, established, right,
Yep.
in terms of foot traffic.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So you just said you're talking about, R1 right now? Or,
We're talking about R1, but in order to do the home occupation, we have to figure out how the wording of that's going to be, and then
and
say,
then
okay,
flow it through to
we
the
need to
other,
flow
like,
through to R1.
rural conservation has home occupations permitted, so
Yep.
it should be
Yep.
consistent. Okay, thank you.
All right, so that would be one difference. Another thing would be the trips. Would be potentially different.
I would think they would be, yes.
So let's just use personal services. Personal services would be limited by the number of trips or by the number of seats or the number of, we probably would want to limit it to the number of trips.
Do we have to have a numerical value? Can't we go back to customary?
No.
It has to have a numerical
No,
value.
because if you could,
No, we've gotta have something to hang on. If we're gonna go before a judge, we've gotta start getting into our, because customary is too nebulous. Depends on the environment.
Would another potential difference be number of additional parking spaces?
Yeah. That would control potentially the amount of impact. Let's say you're a dog room. We do.
we do.
Yeah.
We do. We have two of them.
One of
Them's not permanent. Yeah, I mean, if you limit the number of parking spaces and you know that, let's say, a dog grooming is gonna take 2 hours or 3 hours, and you have 2 parking spaces, the most you're gonna probably get is 6 to 10 trips a day out of that use.
But if you have a barber shop, I don't know how long it takes to go to
Barber shop's
man's hair, probably less than it takes to do a woman's hair, but you could have 3 trips an hour
Yeah.
for 8 to 10 hours.
So you can deal with that by limiting the number of seats,
Right,
one chair.
but
That's
even
all.
with one chair, like if it's a barber, you could still have impact on number of,
There's some,
Yeah.
but people don't have to wait that long, I can tell you from personal experience.
Or men don't wait that long.
That's right.
maybe that's what it is.
Not unless you're getting a haircut.
My supervisor.
We're getting haircuts. We don't need this particular stylist to do it, just need a haircut.
With dog groomer, wouldn't the number of employees also impact
It would.
how many they're gonna process in the course of the day? So if you have a dog groomer with 1 employee versus a dog groomer with 2, you're going to have more dogs groomed, hence need more parking spaces.
No, you could look at it and say, well, I have 2 employees, it's myself and another employee. So I need to have 2 spaces for us to park, and we can only work on one animal at a time, so we need at most 3 more spaces.
Well, no, well, but if you have the owner and 2 employees,
Then you need
you
6
could
spaces.
potentially work on 3 dogs at the same time.
That's right, so you would need 6 spaces, because you'd need a space for your client to drop off come inside, give you the animal, and either wait or come back at another point.
And then you potentially need another space for the next one coming in while they're waiting.
Yeah, which is why I said three customer spaces. So three employees and 3 customer spaces. Because you're not gonna end up with dogs hanging around waiting to be groomed.
Well, if you have the right magazines, it's not a problem.
You haven't been in the one that I have been into. They don't have any magazines.
So is 40 pretty generous?
Yeah, 40 is
Yeah.
way
Is it too generous?
Yeah.
Well, think about 140 trips coming in and out.
It's great.
Well, I mean, I think it's very generous.
It's,
24. How's that for
it's way high.
I'm thinking 12.
That's 6 trips a day, 6 customers a day.
with no employees.
Well, if you have like 7 businesses.
I like the way you think, so now we're gonna have
times 40.
2 employees, so we're gonna have 2 customers. No, we're gonna have 1 customer come in and they go.
I think that's a tough one,
I like
we're
that.
gonna talk about regulating that one.
Yeah.
The only thing it does is it gives you, sit there and watch how many come in and out. That's one thing. It also gives you an idea of what they have to
I
take.
think 24, 25,
Well, that's what I was gonna say,
20,
24.
24.
yeah.
I mean, it has to be practical from the standpoint of, if you're going to have a home occupation to make some money, if you're so limited by any one of these things that you can't make any money, then the whole thing's out the window.
Yeah.
So,
And the point is, if you grow, you're gonna wanna go to a place where.
Bigger anyway.
well, yes,
But if you have 6 home occupations on your street, which we have probably close to, we have more traffic on our dead-end road than a lot of highways. So,
wow.
from a practical point of view, there's a whole lot of ways of looking at this.
Yeah.
And if you're living in the neighborhood.
Is there not a homeowners association
Because-
out there?
No,
Okay.
it's lapsed. So, you know, the thing is, human nature is they're gonna push the envelope, right? That's not
Yeah.
human nature. I'm gonna knit in my home, that's fine, I don't care if anybody knits in their homes, I don't care if they sell mittens. But when they start, having 17 cars in their yard, because they've got a whole knitting factory going on, then that's a problem for a neighborhood. It has detracted from the neighborhood, has killed the neighborhood, has killed the wildlife in the neighborhood, has changed the whole neighborhood forever, because you cannot take it back once you've given it away. And human nature is they're gonna take it to the limit. And you're always gonna be tested, as right now with our situation. Nothing's being done because perhaps things aren't written correctly, I don't know, but.
What makes it difficult is I'd say, I'd guess a quarter of the residents in this town probably doing some work in their home.
And that's great, I
And-
think it's great.
And so
It's
if we
when they-
restrict it to, it's a fine balance,
Right.
how much can we restrict it
If-
before it becomes a
If
problem?
I'm trying to go to sleep at night and the woodworker is working at 2 o'clock in the morning sawing logs
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah,
and I haven't had a night's sleep, that's a problem.
that's a problem.
But
yeah.
all those things, I mean, it's just so hard to write this, but I would err on the side of caution. I would be more restraining, because people are always gonna push the envelope. So the looser goosey you get, the more trouble you're gonna have, because it is, again, you get, you get a permit for 6 children to babysit, guess what? You got 12. And then and neighbors don't wanna be enforcers,
So
that's not, we
one-
wanna be good neighbors.
One thing I will say, whatever we come up with, if you like it, you and your whole neighborhood have to show up at
Oh,
town
we will,
meeting.
and we will.
Because we have done a wonderful job every year, and it all, most of the time gets voted down. So,
We will.
because there could be just one thing that bothers a
Right.
number of people,
And
and
it's
it's done
really all
fine.
comes down to being a good neighbor, and also for having some sensitivity to our environment and where we are located, and it's not just because it's a river. For instance, somebody is washing cars or commercial vehicles, and the detergents are running down into the river, all those things that go with all this stuff. So I would err on the side of caution, because you're gonna get people who are always going to do their own thing. So that's all, that would just be my comment, and I'll shut up the rest of you.
What if this, right now, this says that a permit is obtained from the CEO. for the conditional use? What if we say that you have to come before the planning board to get a conditional use permit?
I've circled that, that's where you gotta go,
I have no problem with that.
cause that's the
Okay,
only place
because
you
if they
people
have to
get
come
hurt.
before the planning board, all of the neighbors get notified as soon as we get.
That's nice.
And you get an opportunity to be
I would
heard.
love to be
Yes,
notified.
Okay.
yes.
But still take the pictures and document it in the log.
Right.
And then this is like daycare, you know, we were talking about septic systems that aren't built for daycare, for that occupancy of 20 people, because you get the daycare, you get the daycare helper, you get the kids, you get the people coming to pick them up and using the bathroom. And guess what, the septic system fails because it was never intended for that use. So then what happens? Okay, that septic system starts leaking into the river, correct? Because that's what's gonna happen. And then the town, a neighbor complains. And so the neighbor goes to the town. The town comes out and says, guess what, you need a new septic system, which they can do. And then that neighbor only has to go to the state to say, I don't have the money for that. And then you all pay for the new septic system. It just goes on and on. I'm just
Okay.
asking that, just please err on the side of caution.
So I need to make sure everybody understands. If we go with Donna's suggestion, there are two types of home occupations. One of them requires nothing from us, the other one requires you show up in front of the planning board. And I don't have a problem with that, by the way. So if your grandma's sitting at home making mittens and selling them at the flea market or wherever it is that you happen to go, not a problem, you don't have to come register. Everybody else has to come in front of the planning board to get a conditional use permit. And I don't have a problem with that. What do you think will happen?
It's not
Town meeting?
everyone, it's only people that have the employees, right? It's only
Yeah.
3 or more, right?
Well, no,
No,
there's other
if
things.
you look at type 2, if you look at type 1,
Yeah,
those are the folks that are sitting at home and
Yeah,
don't have
got it.
employees and aren't doing anything. Everybody else is coming before the planning board. Because there's only 2 classifications of home occupation,
Well,
type 1 and type 2. Type 2 comes before the planning board.
and we're talking about maybe doing subdivisions of that based on.
That's true, yes. Yeah, we may split some of that off into the R1.
Or they may become subcategories like daycare. And-
Daycare is a separate use.
Right,
Daycare's
so
a
they
separate
may just
use,
become
contact
separate,
yards are a separate use, so there's, those wouldn't be
so there
considered
are subsets.
as home
right.
occupations anyways.
Okay. I like it.
I don't have a problem with that.
how long is that gonna jam up anything? What does that really look like in real time?
In real time, you put in your application, you make sure that you bring us all of the paperwork. Typically, if everything goes smoothly, what, 4 meetings maybe? Maybe 2
2
months.
months.
About 2 months worth of time,
Maybe less.
maybe less.
What does that do with everyone else that are
It's-
not on number 1, that have been existing for?
Yeah, that's a good question, how do we deal with existing? Do we do the same thing we did with contractor yards? Do we have a registration process in which you come in, you register your home occupation, with the planning board? And if you meet the qualifications, minimum qualifications, then you're a permitted home occupation. Or you're recognized as, you're registered as a home occupation.
Right, you
Should
may
we have an
be-
amnesty?
That's something the planning board will have to grapple with. I
Yeah.
mean, amnesty is one of the
Well,
concerns, and then there might be situations where there's an egregious violation, an egregious situation where somebody's gone so far that they're running a business and it's not a home occupation in any way stretch of the imagination. It's a contractor yard that's in the middle of a residential area that it was never supposed to be, or it's a pick something, they're running a doctor's office in the middle of the neighborhood, and they have 3 doctors there,
We would take care of
that
that.
kind of thing.
So, one guy.
We gonna find those? No, we're not gonna find any like that,
Right.
cause we pretty much know where they are.
I'm just looking at time constraint, if you're looking at 2 months,
Well,
that's,
I mean, there's
that's
the,
realistic.
But they can keep operating.
Not supposed to.
They can.
Yeah,
yeah.
One who's done,
Well,
they keep
it's called by-
going,
Okay,
it takes that long just to go through all the paperwork.
hang on just for a second. One of the issues that we will find is that when people come in to register, they may be considered to be a legally non-conforming use, which means they'll be allowed to continue on, but they won't be allowed to expand in any way, shape, or form, so we have to address that
Isn't that a
issue.
nasty insurance thing too, though?
No, if you're legally
Because they're allowed.
non-conforming, you can go get loans and
Okay.
you can get
Right.
insurance.
You just
You're
can't sell
legally,
business there.
the term is legally non-conforming, which means you have a right to continue your non-conformance.
Sure.
I understand the idea and the simplicity of having, in fact, exempt home occupations and permanent occupations. No one wants to come to the Arundel Planning Board, no offense, it's on it for 3 years.
No, thank you.
That's
But
not true.
no one wants to, it's expensive, it takes a lot of time. I would encourage this committee to think hard about having an intermediate step, that's some kind of staff review or something that's short of a full-blown conditional use permit.
I would support that, I think it's, and I don't know how you define it, like, that's the really hard part, but I think Chip's right, that it feels a little heavy for certain things, but I couldn't offer, you know, what that description is.
That's where the problem becomes, because if we don't have a conditional use, you're not gonna get notified. That person's gonna have,
But
If
then
it's
they get
low
dismissed
impact
out of
enough of a
hand,
business, I
so
don't
they
care.
wouldn't need to be here at the
But-
planning board.
What you referenced at the beginning, that was actually a home occupation permit that never should have been issued as a
No.
home occupation
But
permit.
it's-
Right.
but it was, and look at the problem it created, because nobody knew that there was a home occupation that was in existence that
That makes sense.
expanded out past what they should have been. If a permit had been issued or gone through the planning board as a conditional use, you would have found out about it early on, and it may have prevented.
If we could put notice requirements in, so that at an intermediate level, everybody within some parameters is gonna get notice that this is pending. The problem is getting hurt. If you go to staff,
It's true.
they're not gonna conduct the hearing.
No, we do, but it's during the daytime.
During the daytime, nobody can come, those types of things. Planning boards at night, you can get there and everybody can get, if they don't like it, they can come forward and say why.
And there are multiple opportunities, because you'll get notified now, when the permit application is presented. When somebody comes and says, I want a permit to do something, the abutters are going to be notified. You're gonna get notified when we have a public hearing, so that you can come and show up at the public hearing. So there's a couple of different opportunities for people to voice an opinion about what's going on. In staff review, you gotta be there during the daytime. And it's a one-time shot.
Yeah, so one day, the process takes 14 days.
Yeah.
usually.
But, and I don't, it's off topic, but maybe the planning board needs to, in its regulations, accelerate these as against what you do with, you know, subdivisions and other conditional uses. You know, accelerate the process so people can get through it a lot quicker.
Or lower some of the submission
Right,
standards. I think
exactly.
that would really do it.
Is there an opportunity, in kind of getting back to Donna's point about understanding what we have and Susan's point about, you know, looking at a list of creating a level, we'd have to be comfortable with all the particular uses defined, but if it's outside of that, then it goes to the planning board. And it may be a more of a narrow list, but, and I hear you and appreciate, you know, because I would have been very upset if we didn't have the opportunity to have a public hearing. But I'm gonna guess most of what's going on isn't, I don't, maybe I'm wrong, Tad, what we went through, is that
It
happen
was
everywhere?
unusual. Well, no,
Okay.
it was a little unusual, but there are, you're hearing that
Yeah.
that there are other incidents that are occurring elsewhere in town.
But that to me seems like that's not a home occupation even by
Correct.
our definition,
agreed.
so
That's
like
an
that's an enforcement
enforcement
issue
issue.
as opposed to
Exactly.
an ordinance issue,
Yeah.
was my, very quick
People,
analysis.
we argue about that all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Fair
where
enough.
As you confirm.
the difference between one employee.
What is and
and two
isn't,
employees. One
Yeah.
employee
and I
is
can
permitted,
disagree.
two employees should come to us.
Yeah, but that doesn't address the issue of the type of use.
Oh, yes, but we can work on that whole thing, but to have that intermediate step would be, if you have one employee, then it could look through staff review, and it could look at it based on its use. But
I
if you have
guess,
more than one employee, you'd have to come to the planning board.
I guess I just don't see that as solving that particular problem. But I did have a
Depends on
question
the
in
use.
relation to something that Chip just mentioned, in terms of expense. If you're, you know, you're putting up a building and starting a whole new business, you've got architects and everything, tons of expenses, and every time one of those has to come back to the planning board, you're paying for him to do so. If I'm just a homeowner and I wanna come to the planning board and say, I'm making widgets and I've got one employee and I need a permit to do this in my basement, that should not involve a ton of expense on my part, should it?
I have no idea, I don't see why it would.
We should try to
Well,
minimize it.
not in reference to what the planning board is going to demand. You know, I mean, is the planning board gonna say, well, since you're in your basement, even though you're not making any changes, except you're gonna, you know, fill the workbench, you need to have an architect approve that, you know, that's.
Engineer,
But
we
that
do
gets
the
to
electrical,
Ted's
we need to
comment about
upgrade the electrical.
submissions, we'd have lower submission standards, you're not gonna need engineering studies, you're not gonna need traffic studies, you're not gonna need a lot of stuff.
Alright, that's precisely where I'm going.
Right,
Don't you
and
see
the select
some-
board would probably set a reasonable permit fee that would not,
Yeah,
Be
the only
anywhere
thing would
near
be
what
the
you-
well, the only thing that.
the notices, yeah.
It's the notification, the notices aren't the expense, it's the notification.
In color, in paper.
It's the paper that's the.
Well, I just wanna kinda throw out there, I'm gonna kinda throw myself under the bus again, but that's already happened within the past
From
week.
what I heard,
Um,
Buster Olney.
Yeah.
I kind of run a business out of my house. When I say that, I
We're on
mean,
tape, yeah.
I'm doing the paperwork, scheduling, that kind of thing. I have 10 employees, none of them ever come to my house. Because all I'm doing, I have officers go work different locations. I do keep security equipment, barricades, and stuff like that at my house in a shed.
But that, to me, that's not a home occupation, because you're.
But then
I'm doing
you,
work there, you
kind
make
of
any
your
paperwork.
definition, because I'm storing it in a shed, well, now I'm a contractor yard.
Okay, I see the issue.
Okay, so now I'm gonna have to go through 2 months of, no offense, but BS, to go through planning boards, you know, to just say, oh, I'm just keeping stuff there. I don't have anyone ever coming to my house. I don't have customers coming to my house, I don't have employees coming to my house. I'm not hauling an 18-wheeler full of equipment, it's whatever I can throw in the back of my pickup truck.
But even in type one, it says that
So,
it will be obscured, storage of materials or products shall be screened from view, from the abutting properties and streets, so if you haven't, this is for type one. So as long as you screen it or it's in a shed, it shouldn't be an issue. That would be my interpretation, if, you know,
I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
I was wondering, where do you think you're running afoul here?
yeah, you're not,
So-
you're fine.
Come
Well-
to the location.
But if you stacked everything all over your front yard and whatever, and that's how, that would be a different story, but if it's discreet, back to that stupid word, you have it in a shed, it really doesn't impact
It's not
the
visible.
character of the residential neighborhood, so you're good.
The only thing would be the 25% floor area. So that's the only numerical threshold in here.
There is the question though, and that,
that isn't even,
I think Sean, you're asking about just that hurdle, just to go to town, fill out paperwork, probably cost money, might have to get some plans drawn up. I know a lot of contractors, they're just not gonna get around to it, it just, and it is, I agree with Chip, I don't know what the, how to have a public forum unless we do come to the planning board, but I think, it's hard for some not to be seen as just a burden, I guess, just.
Well, maybe what you would do is adopt the same process as the staff review committee uses right now. If we
Something
went
like that,
over it,
where you,
which is a much lower level.
and at a certain point, then you refer to the planning
If it
board.
gets big, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, right now, what happens is the staff review committee has the expertise to make decisions, make some judgment calls in the field. We've been around long enough, we can make judgment calls of what's important and what isn't. And, what we do is very simply put, we go over the stuff, we have a sidewalk, we have a hearing at the same time. We've reviewed the materials, and we only notify the abutters, and we notify on, and we post on the website. We don't advertise in the newspaper. I don't know whether legally the planning board can get away with that, but we don't, which reduces the cost and frankly the expenses
It's
and the
quicker.
grief. It's much quicker. We can put it in around 14 days. You've got a complete application, we can put it in 14 days. That's not a burden.
I don't know.
Stretching it out over 2 months, though,
That can be a burden.
Yeah,
And what I try to do with applicants, even at the planning board level, I try to get them as prepared as possible before we go to the planning board. You know, and say, no, you need to do this, this, and this, so that you don't languish. So you say, well, that's a great idea, but come back with this, this, and this for us.
that harms the reputation of the planning board over the years. They come in and they have told us, every time I come in, you're just squeezing me for more money and more input, and it's not really that way. They just weren't as well prepared as they should have been. But that image is still out there, and it doesn't make the planning board look good.
It's too bad, because you guys have improved your turnaround much better.
I think so. I
Oh,
think
you've
we're-
improved significantly.
But on
Just the
staff,
last one we
does,
had was-
does staff review turn around and require, major drawings, or also like a property survey? I mean, I'm just asking these questions.
Probably they need parking, they need the
When they
25%.
have parking and, you know, we make some judgment calls on whether or not.
I mean, per their submission.
Yeah, I'm talking about that, we make judgment calls on what you really need.
Yeah.
Usually it's of the scale where they're not building something up against the property line.
Right.
Just be a
They're
sketch.
adding a couple of parking spaces.
how about-
They're doing
We have a
conditional use.
whole list of things that people ask us to waive all the time. Stormwater, lighting, we get asked to waive stuff all the time, and we do. I don't think that the process is that onerous. It might be on a home occupation, for some guy who's been working on it, that might be a little bit much. But if we're talking about some guy coming in and wants a permit to start up a business, which is what we usually look at, or a subdivision, I don't think it's that much of a hassle for for them to go through the process of
There's gotta be some
providing us
reason
with the
why most of the
documentation.
contracts haven't come to us for contract.
Yeah, they don't want to. For the same reason,
If
people don't wanna pay their taxes. Take a look at the list of people that owe the town property tax, not property, personal taxes that are out there. They just don't want to.
I think sometimes it's more fear, and then, you said that law came into effect, and then we got a permit, right? You got a permit, that code, right? Electrical, I thought it did kick in expenses, you said that earlier, is that not the case?
The building code?
Yeah,
Yeah, the building code, the state building code is pretty tough stuff.
so that does kick it in, and that would be why probably
Yeah.
contractors are running.
But if you were,
It's
yeah,
open
but,
up a can of worms.
Exactly.
yeah, well, that doesn't really affect contractors as much as it does putting putting mixed uses in a house, putting mixed uses in a structure, especially with residential is concerned, because that's an insurance issue. If you're in violation of the IBC and you have a fire, your insurance may not cover you, because you're in
Life
violation.
safety issue.
It's a life safety issue, and it's,
Well, let's put it this way, right now, the way the insurance companies are, they're turning around and refusing people
Correct.
for the slightest,
right, you're right.
I mean, and that's not even a business.
That's right. And that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why Jim is very adamant about it, because he understands that people are at risk if they don't understand. They have responsibilities, and they have liabilities that they will have with their insurers, and even with the state. Life safety code is a state law.
how about this, how about if we just make staff review the first step? And then staff reviews, okay, either their decision is to, okay, you're all set, end the process. Or, well, we need to know, parking situation, that kind of thing, okay, that needs to go before planning board, now you need to go before planning board.
That might be, the only thing about staff review, and this is the deficit to it, that I found, is that it's conducted during the daytime. And most people work.
And so,
Neighbors.
So
we
it's the
put
butters
neighbors,
that might
neighbors
have
come, I
involved.
have more people come to me after the fact saying, I didn't know about this. And I got the notice, but I had to work that day, or I was out of town on business and I couldn't come.
Can it be done by
Yeah.
email?
Written comment or?
Well, it can't be done by email, cause I don't have everybody's email. mean,
No, I meant if they wanted to contact you with the,
Yes, oh, no, the
Detail.
notice I sent to them,
Stuff, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
sure, absolutely, but, you know, it's a 7-day turnaround, and.
Well, I mean,
usually
if,
That's really not
you know,
enough time.
it's, again, throwing myself under the bus, if it's something like me, I'm not mixing any chemicals, I'm not making anything, I'm not dealing with, manure waste or anything like that, I'm not dealing with, you know, lights and stuff, you know, hydroponics or anything where things are gonna be glowing in the middle of the night. It's stuff like that you look at, you go, okay, not gonna be dealing with neighbors, fine. Make it a step, the next step, kind of notify, they have a week, 2 weeks to respond. You know, if there's something that kind of pops up, it's like, well, that might be an issue with your neighbors. They have 2 weeks to respond, they don't respond, or, you know, the response that you get are, not with me, or whatever, then you move on to the next step.
We can look at that, I mean, we do it now, so it's not an unusual thing, I mean, it's an intermediate. If we have a problem where it's too big, we think it's too big for us, or if we're at an impasse, we have four members, so if we have a tie vote, it goes to the planning board. So, I mean, that's the way that works. So, I mean, we can look at that. I think the first thing would be to start classifying what our uses are.
But I think some of these have to come to the planning board regardless.
And that may come out when you start trying to classify.
If we classify the
Everybody
uses, I
says,
think
yeah,
the
that's gonna
intensity
go.
is,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
where
that's
we're gonna
What I
sort
was
out
gonna suggest.
what's planning board, what's staff, and what's
Right.
CEO.
Yeah. That will be the case.
Calendar.
Sounds like
I
we
mean,
got-
I tend to think that 2 employees should come to the planning board simply because that's gonna be a big impact on you. You're gonna have the two employees coming in and, you know, in and out, lunch, in and out. You're gonna have.
Well,
you're
again,
gonna generate a
that
number
might
of
be
ITEs.
the case in R1, but might not be the case in R4.
oh,
So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
Those are all
no, you're
things
right,
we need
it's,
to play around with.
that's a.
And even when we have done it and we've gone through all the lists and made all the decisions based on everything we know, we're still going to be wrong somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
But that will eventually surface.
That's the old, you know,
We won't even talk about cumulative
classroom
impact
speak
of
to my
multiple
mom.
home occupations on the same
So
site.
I will know.
Right, okay.
That can be
So-
worse than anything.
Could you distribute that list to everybody?
yes, of course.
Or send it to Ted and he can send it out to all of us?
I'll just pull it off, it's in a lot of the documents I sent you, I think I kept them, so
Yeah,
I'll just take it and.
Well, I've got all of those emails.
Yeah, but
still.
so you don't have to muddle through it all, I'll do it, cause
I figured you were gonna send it to Donna, you could send it.
Yeah, I'll send it to all of you.
And then, that'll give us, more stuff to work on. So I think we've made some pretty good progress thus far. Once we get this done, we'll go
We
back.
go to step 2.
We'll go to step 2, which is going back and finishing, looking at home occupation, home occupation, R1.
Yeah.
So
Can I
the
ask
other-
a question? How does the public, is this information public, and if so,
Thank
how do
you.
we have access to it?
Well, I can,
What?
Dan's forgot his key again.
Okay.
To answer that, if the, I can post this stuff.
Yeah.
I can post it on the website.
Thank you.
Ken has your email.
Scott, thank you.
Sure does.
So you should,
But I think, you know, I think it would be better for you just to post it, so you can grab it whenever you want to. So I can create a website, I can create a section under planning board and comp plan or comp plan.
Like I said,
And might just even do an R1 and start posting the materials there.
Please make it clear though, that these are all in discussion, works in progress,
Yes.
so that we don't have
Mhm.
the problem with people being up in arms about something they don't need to be up in arms about,
Right.
because it hasn't happened yet.
Right. I proposed or under consideration,
Yeah.
under consideration.
That's probably better than proposed.
Yeah, proposed does it.
Yeah,
Because
His head will explode.
when we get done with all of this,
Will be proposed.
it has to come to the planning board, the planning board will craft it up and have a public hearing, and it'll become a proposed item at that point.
And then it goes to the town.
And then it goes to the town. Okay, next on the list, we're gonna get that from Susan, the proposed list of
Yeah,
permitted and conditional uses, potential for design standards.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
didn't we want the
sure.
proposed list of permitted and conditional uses?
Yeah.
We kinda did that last time,
yeah,
just wanted that.
Oh, that list,
clarified.
okay.
well, I found some errors.
Oh, cool.
I love that.
Well, okay.
Omissions.
Been there yet.
One thing,
Okay.
Number one should say accessory structure slash use.
Yeah, but I think we're,
Needs to be combined, get rid of number two.
they need to be separate,
Why?
because the use and a structure are two different things.
Sure are.
Okay, so we have reversed our decision from 2 meetings ago?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I gave it
Okay.
some thought.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
Well, you should tell
I
me.
should tell you.
Yes.
I did tell you about the pier and dock, right? That's
Yes,
straight out
you
of
did.
shoreline zoning.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay,
we should stay with shoreline
number
zoning.
6, you have crossed it out, yeah.
I don't know
filling
what
it-
Well, that was
but-
us.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
a-
that's that one.
I got rambunctious.
You got carried away with
I
it.
did.
Okay.
So this
Strike
is
through.
one,
We
strike
leave
through.
5-7 in there.
7,
5, 7, 8.
Oh, that's on.
5, 7,
Yes.
8,
so when we
Out.
get this, this is from the last meeting.
This is
11 is
last
out,
one.
12 is out,
That
13
was-
is out, 14 is out, 16 is out.
Right.
And then 17, we're keeping Wolf Causeway and uses.
Only because it's.
So what's,
shoreline
from the
zone.
From the zoning board.
code,
Yeah, so
6.0,
when we got-
6.0,
Yeah, yeah.
6.1?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, number 9 is the
Elimination
conditional
stuff.
zone issue, we're
Same.
gonna do all of that. And then 14,
Consolidated.
we were gonna take out.
Are we gonna take out uses of someone?
No, no, no,
Okay,
not-
so that
no,
was in the
Residential
minutes, the
multifamily.
things.
Yes,
Right,
things that-
okay,
Oh, you did?
right.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't have that. I didn't have that.
I was not here.
I know we discussed.
We
taking-
discussed it, I wasn't sure if we actually did it.
Did, taking multifamily out of R1?
I didn't cross it
Discussed, I
out.
don't think we made a
I don't think
decision
we
on
made a
that.
decision.
Yeah, I
the-
didn't think we had.
Part of the discussion was that if we were going to take it out, since it's in the comp plan, we would have to take it out of the comp plan, and my response to that was, shoot, then we have to have a meeting.
Yeah.
So, like, that's, I know that's as far as we got,
Mhm.
so,
Multifamily defined as 5 units and greater, so one.
Three
three,
units.
3 and greater.
This is,
Yeah, that's-
I mean, I think the group liked the idea of
Yeah,
being
that's
multi,
the way it is right now.
multifamily because
The
they
big
felt it
big
didn't
one.
really
Oh, this is just
fit in the
a
R1.
copy.
So if it doesn't fit in R1, where does it
The
fit?
proposed changes.
Well, R1 though traditionally is single family houses, I mean,
It's
across
also
the
the
board,
more
in terms
dense-
of
It's also
the.
1 acre, and turn on your hip.
But we also have it in the DB1 and DB2.
It's allowed in DB1, DB2.
Actually, it's encouraged there instead of
I thought-
stratified vertical,
I thought it
vertical
would,
stratification.
I thought it would have been encouraging D1 more than anyplace else, because that's where we want higher density.
Yeah.
Why would we be deleting it?
Right, no, he meant
You meant
R1.
R1, not
In
the-
Oh, in R1.
I'm sorry, R1, yeah.
I
Why
think
would,
everybody felt uncomfortable because it was gonna change the character of single-family residential.
Right, because R1 traditionally is single family residence.
so why would that fit any better in R2?
Well, you
R3?
get R2.
We haven't got
Because you're gonna have more acreage
So-
for one.
From what I'm hearing, we wanna not allow them anywhere in town, because they don't fit in with any rural character.
If not, well, we might find a place for them, obviously, we're gonna find a place for them, because we can't eliminate them altogether, because duplexes are two-family houses, but in R1, people's, I think, expectation is, from outside the community and in general, is that R1 means single-family housing. That's what it means.
I don't read it that way, I just think,
The comp plan recites that the residential uses allowed a density of 1 dwelling per acre. Allowed residential uses will include single, two-family, as well as multifamily dwellings.
Yeah,
Well,
which is where we left the discussion.
Yes.
Right.
That if we took it out of here, we had to take it out of there.
Right, I think we should,
Okay, well,
that's
so
just my opinion.
what would the objection be, just cause I have my single-family house, I don't want a three-family next to me?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, but-
I'm saying that honestly.
But we're all right with, so many other things that,
Mhm.
that I think.
Well, the point is that Tom just made is that the comp plan said they should be in there.
Yeah.
Mhm. And my understanding was, it is the denser populated, we were encouraging the
The growth would be there.
cluster more.
But why would you want growth in R1?
I don't think I want any in single family.
It doesn't, it means
It
one
just
acre.
happened to be,
High density.
Correct,
That's what
high
it is.
density,
Yeah.
where we wanted the growth,
Well, where else would you put these things?
right, where we, yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I mean, my definition of R1, everything I understood always meant single-family housing.
If it's zoned business.
And maybe it
Usually-
doesn't mean that in Arundel, I don't know.
Usually that was
they just
the
picked
indication
pick the
was
first
by the
number.
lot size because your lot size,
I would consider looking at
is generally speaking of a 1 acre lot,
Right.
okay? And you can't turn around necessarily put a duplex or anything else on a 1 acre lot, because you don't have enough of a land,
If you had 4 acres, you could.
It's
Yeah.
incidental to a business.
but you're saying,
And if you're talking
Yeah,
about
see,
vertical
you're throwing
segregation, that first floor must be
another
commercial.
avenue, which would be allowed because you have the acreage.
But if we take it out, it wouldn't be allowed regardless of the acreage.
Some sort of, you know, you need open space if you have,
Duplex, two duplex.
you know, multifamily on 4 acres, you know, you're not gonna have
Leave the
4
rest
houses
alone.
there,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So here the definition is, it typically stands for 1 residence per lot. That's what technically most people construe R1,
By acreage.
Except for here in Arundel.
except for Arundel.
Yep.
I would say it wouldn't be a Arundel home, because, I mean, we have multifamily, when I say multifamily, attached, single-family homes, classic around
Correct.
all over the place, and I know I've designed.
That's why we have accessory apartments.
Correct.
Well,
If
I
they're
was thinking,
attached
if
to
you
the
look at
building, if
PUD
they're attached to
developments
the
that
main
are
house,
around.
right?
No, it doesn't have to be.
They don't have to be now.
Not anymore.
Oh, okay, cause I,
They just
those were supposed to be in-law apartments.
They
for
were,
your
they've
in-laws.
kind of morphed a little bit over the years. They started off as in-law apartments, and now they're guest houses, accessory apartments, basically.
I think we could still think about
I
that.
don't,
I mean,
I
I don't have a problem with
with
townhouses, but
multifamily.
I don't
one way or
see
the other.
cluster housing in.
I really don't. If it's in the R1 or it's.
If
in the
Arundel has their
PUD.
own
I'm not gonna-
definition of R1, so be it.
Well, PUD would be perfect, because that gives us the most flexibility that we would be able to have a variety of different kinds of housing types on the same property, without having to be bound by lot dimensions and space and bulk dimensions. Give the most flexibility for design, and also the best flexibility for providing open space. Because you don't have to have rigid cookie cutter lots.
And more kids in the school system.
That depends on
Yeah.
how many units, how many bedrooms you have in these.
How much more do you
You don't have any PUD standards.
Pretty mind-boggling.
Okay.
I will pull them out at a moment's notice. I've already, remember that, Rich? I've got like three different sets. I'm all set to go, just pull the trigger.
And what was that on?
Okay,
The PUD.
so let's make a decision about multifamily. Leave it in the R1, take it out of the R1?
Leave it in,
Leave
I
it.
think.
And are you leaving it in at 3 units or 4?
It's three, because that's also the state standard.
So how, okay, never mind. If you leave it in, it's fine.
So what,
Multifamily standard.
but what about 3 or?
Well, that's the
Multi-unit
state standard.
Like a triplex, is that what you mean?
So what,
Duplex?
what if there was like a
Single-family duplex,
condo
I'm just
development?
thinking from a residential land.
Condo is actually a form
Like
of ownership,
1 to 4 family is
but
saleable,
it
easy to
usually
rent on the residential
implies
side,
that there
but
aren't
over
lots.
4,
Okay,
you have
Traditional lots.
commercial.
They're
So
talking
it's
about
all
actually
of
three.
the common land is owned by the
So-
association.
Okay, that's fine.
So-
Point for,
What if somebody wanted to have, 10 apartment units, like, I think may not be a bad thing if you wanna have a viable downtown,
Well, this is the R one, this is in the
I mean, when you put
downtown.
streetlights up.
well,
But we have those in
It's
the
around the
downtown, you
streets.
remember, we worked hard to get that
yeah.
in the downtown as part of business development in the downtown.
Posh
Making
house
sure
on
we
the
had
ground
some residential in the downtown area.
Yeah.
And all the people that have a problem might be high. Because they're sampled all the time. Lynn had a point.
So, I didn't realize the state's definition of multifamily was up to 3. In the residential lending world, saleable conforming mortgages, it's 1 to 4 family. So, I guess the danger becomes if it's removed from R1 and it's allowed in DB1 or DB2, because financing those is gonna be problematic in those districts. If you leave it in DB1, R1, that's fine. But just be
Good point.
cognizant of that,
That's
that
good.
we're gonna put people in a situation where they can't finance it, and a commercial appraisal would be required.
Oh, thank you.
If it's
So
zone
3
business,
is maybe the magic number.
I would argue you could probably go to 4.
or I think so too.
Yeah.
So we're
Well,
gonna
I don't think I don't think if somebody wanted to put up, 2 duplexes with a center wall that connected them together, I wouldn't tell them they couldn't do it.
Aesthetically, you probably.
Call
look
it
better.
attached housing if you want to.
Yeah. It's,
Multifamily is attached housing.
it's a multifamily unit.
Multifamily also can be, flats.
Yep.
I mean,
Row houses.
But the way it's done here,
hovels.
well, no, not row houses, no, it would be flats, it would be,
Oh,
first
yeah.
floor, second floor, third floor
Right.
apartment building.
I don't think we
But
could
what
do
would
that.
happen, what would work here would be more the townhouse concept.
I don't
Would you
think
agree?
we could
I
do
mean, that's more palatable.
first, second, and third floor, I think we'd be too high at that point. I think we'd violate the height restrictions.
Nope, remember, we made it so that you could do, if you, somebody wanted to do that in the DB one,
In the
and then so you
DB1,
can get
yes.
that. But here, no.
In the R1, no.
But if we wanna do that, and if we wanna take a look at height restrictions in order to facilitate multifamily, then
And
this
that's
is the
something
time
that we can look at.
That's
But
the next page over.
But we're
Well, the
all
building
agreed
has
right
35
now
feet. You can do
that
it.
multifamily in the R1 is acceptable.
Should stay in
It should stay, okay, okay.
Don't need to change the topic.
We're happy.
Away we go,
Anything
Rick.
else in the residential
Yeah, well, actually, on the next page, according to my notes,
space bulk requirements?
no, performance standards.
Oh, performance
We,
standards.
I thought we either discussed or actually got to eliminating item 1, because we said we were gonna
We
allow.
don't have the one item. All residential subdivisions of more than
4 lots should be
4 lots shall be
clustered, right.
clustered.
Right,
Did we do away with that?
because we had,
Okay.
in the comp plan, it has the option of the 10-acre lots.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
until that's done, until we do that. Cause
Well,
right now,
Something has to happen first.
that means we have to, oh boy, that means we have to go and change all the cluster stuff too.
Well, why would we be pulling out in
No,
the first
only
place?
in the
I
R1.
missed that conversation.
Actually, the 10
Like
acre
here
was
and-
more in some other zones, I
Yeah.
don't
Oh,
think
yeah,
it was in the R1.
but, to Donna, to your point, we wouldn't have to look at clustered in other sections, we're just, because this is specific to R1.
Right.
All permitted activities in the R1 district shall conform to the applicable performance standards specified in section 5, and all subdivisions of more than 4 lots need to be clustered. If we just took away that requirement, that would solve the problem, because
Right.
we wouldn't be talking about clustering in the R1.
Right.
Right,
That's
and
exactly
why
where you
took it
want a
away.
cluster.
That's what I
Well,
said.
no,
But
it doesn't mean
this
that
is what
you can
Don-
still do
You
it,
could
it's
do it,
just not
but it's
required.
not required.
And the reason is, in the latest permutation of the comp plan, there's an allowance for, instead, let's say you had 100 acres. Instead of clustering your development, you could sell 10-acre lots. So you have the appearance, more rural appearance of open space, large plots of land.
I thought we were gearing that more
I
towards the
think we have
R4.
to be careful with doing this. First of all, the R1 isn't necessarily the rural district, but I think the cluster provides open space, and we're never gonna keep retaining a rural character if we don't have open space. Never mind wearing my environmental hat, protecting habitat for wildlife. I think cluster is so important to have. Once we pull it out, we'll never get it back in there.
But you
this doesn't-
incentivize it.
This doesn't pull it out.
I
You
don't,
incentivize it, you don't make it mandatory.
how we,
You
I
give
don't,
incent-
well, I
you
don't
give
see
the
anything
developers
in
some
here
bet-
about incentives.
That's not here,
but-
that's maybe in the
I-
regulations, but, or, and get
No,
them here.
I think that's
So
just,
it is regulated, it
Yeah.
is required,
Yeah.
actually, we're written up in,
But that's the way you wanna
number
get
of
clusters in
magazines
place.
about having
To-
mandatory cluster
it's-
zoning.
well, just have, I think most developers, a lot of them, at first, like 15 years ago when we first put it in place, there was a lot of objection because, if people, I can't sell unless I have an acre or more to sell. Now they're realizing, this is gonna save me a lot of money, so I don't have to build that road and put in all,
Oh, yeah.
divide it all up. Yeah. So, I don't know if we necessarily need the incentive, but, and I'm all right with that, as long as we don't just pull it out and not have some type of trigger to incentivize.
You know, you could- in this document, you could simply encourage cluster in those
I think it
situations
should be
where-
required, I think, it's,
I don't know about requiring it, that's,
Well, it does
For-
right now,
this
I
is
mean, the
for-
problem is,
for-
right now, the ordinance says it's mandatory. I mean, we can pull it out of here, but it's still gonna be mandatory. Until we attack that issue, it's gonna be mandatory.
what is wrong with it, what's the downside?
I'm not, what I think the comp plan was looking at, and what the comp plan committee was looking at is, especially, I think it was in more, some of the rural district areas, where you had large lots and people wanted to do large lot developments and 10 acres or more, and the ordinance didn't permit it. And we thought, well, in those areas, that might be very, very appropriate.
Well, if we could have some language saying just that,
Yeah.
but that's different than just pulling it out. So, I'd like to see some type of alternative language
Well-
in there.
This statement says, shall be clustered, that makes it mandatory.
Yep.
So all eliminating that phrase does, as far as I can say, and I may be wrong, is it simply makes it not mandatory.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't do it, it doesn't mean it's not the best way to go, it just means it's not mandatory, you have another option. And there are large parcels in R1. Perhaps none of which makes sense to do in 10-acre lots, but we don't know that. So again, going back to the point I made before, give the people who own the land as much option, or as many options as you can to do what they want to do with their land. Now, your point about the developer saying that this is a cheaper way to go, that's probably gonna drive most of it into clusters.
it just means it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Here it says you have to.
Okay, I still think, and it might sound silly, but someone has to speak for nature. We are so lucky that some land has been set aside already, cause it's just gonna be chipped away. 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre, and no one has access to any of that. But if there's land set aside, the public can have access to that open space. It can
Well,
be-
the alternative to this is not 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre. The alternative to this is 10-acre lots. Minimum 10-acre lots. So you still have 9 acres of open space per house.
There might, I'm not clear where those properties are in R1, we might have 2 or 3.
Well,
Yeah, not many.
Not a lot of them, it's just a matter of
So,
options.
thinking of some ideal for that 100-acre lot that I don't think exists, I think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, all the 8 and 12-acre lots that are gonna be developed, they are all gonna be developed over the next 15 years.
And they would all have to be clustered, because you can't put 2 10-acre lots on a 12-acre lot.
But they would not, if you take,
Yeah, if you
that
take this
statement-
out, they can
that
just
sentence out,
cookie
they can
cut
do whatever they
it.
want.
Yeah.
They could
and
put
just-
8 or 12 1-acre
I
lots in
see
there.
what you're saying, and that was not the intent. The intent in the comp plan was you have 2 options. You can cluster or you can do 10-acre lots.
I don't mean to
But, yeah,
drag this
you
on,
That's all right.
if there was, whatever that other alternative was, if I could see it, I might get it. Right now, all I heard was, let's pull this out, let's get rid of that.
Right, that is all you
And-
heard, because that was what I
and
said.
I think getting rid, maybe instead of getting rid of it, said, might be to keep that and then maybe add a sentence or a paragraph to it.
Well, we have to go to the clustered section and deal with that, and there's two other sections we'd have to deal with that make it mandatory right now. So this would be a major policy change.
Okay.
That we would have to do. And
When I first heard it, I thought, okay, that sounds like a great idea, we'll pull that out, and it allows the landowner to do what they want. But when the comp plan is thinking, well, it's a 100-acre lot, so you're gonna be able to divide it up into 10 acres, and it ignores the reality of the 12-acre lot, because you can't get two 10-acre lots out of a 12-acre parcel. Leave it in there.
Well,
Leave it in there and make them cluster it.
the only phrase I'm concerned about is the shall be. That means you have to.
Mm-hmm.
So that eliminates the possibility of the 10-acre lot. If you had a 50-acre lot, you can do 5 houses. If you have a 20-acre lot, you can do 2 houses. So, 100 acres is just a random number to
But
pick.
if you have a 20-acre lot, you can do 20 houses.
Depends upon whether you're in it for the money or something else.
You're
And
in it
I
for the
know I'm
money.
the only person on the planet who may not do it for the money sometimes. I accept that. It's a failing. But there is that option. Let's say it's my 20 acres and I want to, 20 acres is a bad number because it's only 2 as an option. Let's say it's a 50-acre parcel, all right? And I have 1 child and I want that 1 child to have a house on that. But I also want to make some money. So I'm gonna do 5 10-acre lots. I have 1, my child has 1, and I got 3 strangers living nearby.
Mhm.
As opposed to being forced to
And those-
cluster
And those
when I didn't
three,
want
and
to.
those 3 strangers are gonna sell their house in 1-acre increments, and you're gonna end up with 31
Right.
houses,
Yeah.
or 32 houses on a 50-acre lot.
I think we're agonizing
I don't
over
think
it.
I think we should just leave it the way it is.
We're agonizing over something that virtually doesn't exist in R1. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't.
With the Swecker Farm is now,
Yeah, it's gonna be cut up too.
Yeah.
what else is there, really?
There's been,
Well, yeah, that's-
The rest of, the other big pieces are off of,
Up the road.
Oh,
This
in
way.
the R1, I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean, the wetlands
exactly
in there,
what
yeah.
it's all
the
wet.
comp
Yes.
plan
The
said.
other one is
It
Burt's.
makes it a
Burt's
densely
put it all in
populated
conservation.
area, and it leaves open space.
And of course, you got Mark Burnett.
But his is-
So we're running out of land.
isn't his subject to Maine Farm,
He's in
something or
forever
other?
farm program,
Right.
that's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole swath is gone. And Burt, I think Burt's is in conservation easement too.
And then you got the golf course.
Yeah.
So that takes care of like almost all the big pieces.
Leave it in. That's
Okay.
no
Now,
problem.
I agree with Donna that that is an option when we get into
when we get into other
bigger
areas.
areas. I think that's a very definite option.
Yeah.
But I
Why
don't
can't
think
you
it's
carve
on-
out an exception?
You will carve out it, I think we will
I
carve
mean,
out.
leave it in, but say accepting circumstances where you got 10
Yeah.
acres or more.
Yeah,
or
I like
less
that,
10 acres.
I like that.
Yep, I could do that.
Yeah.
Just add some language to that.
We could do that. I'm gonna recommend we take potential for design standards and put it on the next meeting. And the next meeting, the earliest is the 17th of January, because the planning board has a meeting on the 10th and on the 24th. So I think if we do the 17th and the 31st in January, flip that will work for us.
Yeah, we keep canceling historical society meetings on the third Thursday. It's not nice. Can I just throw one more thing out? I know, at the end of the last meeting, we had a brief introduction to the eternal question of what is rural character.
We
So
still don't know that.
I have taken the liberty of providing for each of you the page we have in the comp plan that addresses that, if you pass it around, please. And just as
I
food,
have this.
food for thought.
Sorry, Marty,
That's
that
all right.
was rude.
No. Come on, take one.
I'm gonna have to write this down.
Oh,
17?
17. Same bad channel.
Hey, Donna, I would argue that based on the 4th paragraph, 3rd sentence, care should be taken to ensure that development occurs with regard for and preservation of significant town resources. Town resources are the land. If we don't cluster it, we're giving away the land. Oh, no, I'm just, because that's what the vision statement says, I say that that's a
It is.
contradictory point of view.
Well, it depends, it's all context, actually.
It is,
really
I
is
won't argue
context.
that point, but I wanna
Depends on
yank
the
down his
situation.
chain, come on, guys.
Yank away.
I would like to take this moment to make a motion that we adjourn for this evening.
I second that motion.
We're all second that
Folks,
motion.
I have calendars here for scouts for a raffle in January. If anybody be interested, they're $5 a piece.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
Do you have
take,
found out,
He takes
do you have
credit.
change?
You just walked in and.
Merry Christmas, Maureen.